Under a blanket of stars, the die-hard cultists of Ash Heath are screaming his name at the top of their lungs, completely obsessed with worshipping this young dude. But as he sits there on his throne, they have absolutely no clue that behind that icy, stone-cold poker face, he is low-key losing his mind and panicking inside. Just a few hours ago, he was pulling a brutal all-nighter, grinding away at his mobile game studio, trying his best to keep his cool. He's wondering where the heck he even is, especially since these people aren't speaking a word of Chinese. Yet somehow, he understands everything they're saying. After desperately trying to piece together this wild situation, the guy finally realizes he just straight-up transmigrated. He tests out his new body, and is honestly shocked by how smoothly he can move around, like it's a literal perfect fit. He also notices that he shares the exact same first name with the host body he just hijacked, making him wonder if that's the whole reason he got pulled into this world. But there's just one massive problem. He didn't inherit a single one of the original Ash's memories. From what he can gather so far, he's supposed to be some kind of holy deity, and these people revere him like crazy. He absolutely cannot screw this up, which has him stressed out of his mind, because he has zero clue what his next move should be. He looks out at the massive crowd of Ash Heath's disciples, who are all just waiting for him to drop some absolute wisdom. He realizes there's no way these fanatics would ever believe him, even if he tried to explain that he's just a confused victim in all of this, and they'd probably just execute him on the spot. Right then, the cultists amp up their chanting, screaming out for the legendary Ash Heath. Suddenly, crazy vibrant lights begin to swirl around him, as his followers keep invoking his sacred name, believing he's the chosen one destined to save their world. Out of nowhere, he drops to his knees, as divine blessings from otherworldly entities start pouring into him. The Lord of a Billion Lights and ruler of battle, courage, and honor hooks him up with some straight-up broken, OP strength. Next, the sovereign of snow, rain, and destiny, alongside the ruler of wisdom, bless him with the literal angel of wisdom. Meanwhile, the ruler of equality and sharing clutches up by granting him the angel of everlasting health. Finally, the ruler of fantasy, love, and joy give him an unmatched, maxed-out charm stat. This insane, infinite power he's just been gifted starts surging wildly through his entire body. Suddenly, he realizes this whole gig might actually be a total banger, and that getting ice-guyed into another world as a legendary hero is peak. Honestly, he's starting to think this whole situation is an absolute blessing, considering he literally just became a legendary hero, handpicked by 4 different gods, and worshipped by an entire army of loyal followers. In no time, he'll be wiping out monsters to save the world, and securing the bag by marrying a stunning princess. But his epic daydream is instantly shattered when his cultists frantically warn him that the Mad Hunters have already tracked down their secret hideout, meaning absolutely everything now rests entirely on his shoulders if they want to survive. He just smirks when he hears who they're up against. I mean, they're obviously the bad guys here, given how villainous their name sounds, so he unsheathes his blade and commands his followers to show him the way, so he can completely smoke the competition. Suddenly, a squad of drop-dead, gorgeous knights raids the sanctuary, straight-up calling Ash out for a duel. Ash can feel that insane, OP power bubbling up inside him, courtesy of those divine buffs from the gods. He prepares to unleash the crazy abilities and skills he just inherited from those celestial beings, even cooking up a hype name for his ultimate move. But he holds back at the last second because he wants to keep things low-key. He lets out a massive swing of his sword, and is completely blown away by the literal reality-tearing aura it creates. However, the hunters fire back with an attack that's 10 times more broken, instantly leaving the majority of Ash's followers fatally wounded. Ash is left completely speechless and rent-free, as the sheer force of the hunter's counterattack sends him flying. That's when it hits him that he's actually a total fraud compared to these guys, even with the stacked blessings of 4 literal gods. Completely rattled by how fast things just went south, Ash realizes he let the hype get to his head and acted way too reckless, especially since he's just an ordinary dude who got ice-guyed from another universe and knows absolutely nothing about how this world operates. For a hot minute, he totally forgot he used to be a miserable corporate slave who got constantly folded by society, which made him act incredibly dumb. The lead hunter steps up and introduces himself as Gerald, an elite operative from the Crime Hunting Bureau. He starts listing off Ash's massive rap sheet, including kidnapping, murder, grand theft, and running the infamous 4 Pillars cult. The guy mockingly tells him that if he has any issues with the charges, he's more than welcome to stop by the Kaimon branch front desk to file a formal complaint straight to the mayor's office. The hunter looks down at him with a smug, disrespectful grin, telling Ash he should have known better than to try and fight back. An elite wing hunter of his caliber, especially since he's totally outclassed by his four double-wing chaos spirits. He slaps a pair of handcuffs straight onto Ash and officially declares that he's under arrest for being the supreme leader of the Four Pillars cult. On that very day, he secured a massive dub for the city's safety by finally locking Ash up behind bars. Later on, inside the crime hunting bureau, an officer starts interrogating Ash. He easily answers the basic stuff like his name and gender, but claims he's suffering from major amnesia, just so he could dodge all their heavy questions. This other hunter named Amy is completely furious, thinking Ash is playing them for fools by constantly ducking their questions. Another hunter confidently chimes in, bragging that he holds a level 1 interrogation license and can make Ash break and confess no cap. Right then, Gerald cuts him off and tells him he needs to take a seat and straight up burn that license of his. He warns the crew that they need to tread lightly around Ash, since they can't just rough him up, thanks to the strict regulations of the Human Rights Act. Plus, Parliament is breathing down their necks watching their every move. Losing her cool, Amy frantically demands they bring in a memory mage, so they can forcefully pull the information out of their prisoner's head. However, Gerald drops a reality check that a memory mage isn't coming, even though locking down that mental evidence is absolutely crucial for them to build an airtight case. He explains that because Ash has witnessed the Four Pillars try to extract his mind is a total dead end, considering no fanatic from that entire organization has ever been vulnerable to memory magic. He points out that mental corruption is literally the Four Pillars' specialty. He brings up how 134 years ago, a memory mage tried to read a cultist's mind and accidentally got brainwashed, turning into a hardcore believer of the Four Pillars himself, which caused the cult to absolutely skyrocket in numbers and make a peak comeback. An annoyed Amy asks how they're even supposed to close this case if they can't get a single confession out of him or rip the memories straight from his brain. Gerald reassures her, saying there's a slow, agonizing death sentence that is perfectly custom-made for a villain as down bad as Ash, and that this entire questioning process is honestly just for show, reminding her that his fate is already sealed for the massive public trial, where the whole city gets to act as the jury on the 15th. At exactly 8 p.m., totally frustrated by this, Amy straight up storms out of the room, loudly declaring she is done wasting her time watching this interrogation. Meanwhile, back inside the interrogation room, Ash is being given regular 15-minute breaks every single hour, solely because they have to play by the rules of the Human Rights Act. Gerald silently studies Ash from across the table, and low-key starts to feel like the guy isn't actually capping, genuinely looking like a dude who has completely lost his mind and memories. He can tell by the sheer panic, utter confusion, and pure terror on his face. He considers the legal loophole that, under the Human Rights Act, if a suspect is legitimately suffering from severe amnesia, they can actually get a get-out-of-jail-free card and avoid criminal charges. And if a successful memory scan could officially prove Ash has no recollection of his past, he would walk out of there a free man, totally innocent. But at the end of the day, bringing in a memory mage is entirely out of the question, meaning the only card they have left to play is letting the court of public opinion decide Ash's fate. Ash sits there thinking about how peak his life could have been if he had just gotten Ice Guide as a legendary, OP hero, instead of a supreme leader of a villainous cult, who got instantly jumped by a whole raid party of elite hunters. The literal exact second he arrived in this fantasy world. It was just absolute garbage RNG that he transmigrated right at the worst time, specifically when the good guys were already closing the net on the evil syndicate that he's supposedly running as the big boss. He looks back at the mountain of incriminating evidence slapped down right in front of his face during the questioning, and it honestly made him want to puke just looking at it, fully confirming that the past owner of this villainous body was a straight-up menace to society. Now he's just nervously wondering how they're going to execute him, while still being low-key grateful that he's at least getting treated like a human being during this whole lockdown process, praying to the gods that this society has already banned capital punishment. Suddenly, out of nowhere, his neck starts burning up with intense heat, and a holographic system screen abruptly flashes before his eyes, announcing that he has just been selected to appear as an exclusive special guest on the Blood Moon Judgment. Even though he's completely clueless, he tries to type out a quick response, but the system instantly shuts him down, stating that because he's currently locked up, and in the middle of an active criminal investigation. All his global messaging privileges have been completely disabled. He figures out that he can actually navigate this UI using nothing but his thoughts, and it basically functions like a high-tech smartphone interface. Too bad, literally all the cool features are currently grayed out, leaving him with 0 functional apps to mess with. But just as he's about to exit out of frustration, he spots a single application that's actually unlocked and working, something called Aurora's Sorcerer Manual. His jaw completely drops when he reads the title, because that is the exact mobile game his studio was developing. Back when he was still living his normal life in the real world, he remembers spearheading the entire project's design and live operations, having downloaded the demo build. To pull that brutal all-nighter right before, he randomly got ice-guyed. Realizing this could be his ultimate ticket out, he quickly drags the icon onto his main home screen, fully claiming it as his official, broken transmigration cheat code. He boots up the app, only to get immediately hit with a wall of red error pop-ups, screaming that there's no network connection available. He's about to completely lose hope, but right then, a notification pops up saying the scouting system is running. Perfectly normal. When he takes a closer look, the only functional features are the gotcha banners and the cash shop. He taps on the 2 active buttons, which immediately redirects him straight to a microtransaction payment screen. But since he's currently broke and has 0 cash on him, he's completely stuck and can't buy his way to a victory. He tries to bypass it one more time, but the game demands money again, bitterly reminding him that his greedy company designed it that way. Just as he's about to throw in the towel, the daily login calendar reboots, allowing him to successfully claim his check-in reward. The game hands him 1 premium origin crystal, which is exactly what's needed to pull a 10x multi on the unit banner, guaranteeing at least 1 high-tier character with every single pull. Feeling absolutely desperate, he smashes that summon button, praying for a miracle to avoid that horrific blood moon execution. He tightly squeezes his eyes shut, hoping and praying he pulls a straight-up OP unit to carry him. But when he reads through the kit and abilities of the character he pulled, the Berserker Sword Maiden, Ash lets out a massive, disappointed sigh, realizing that even this starter unit requires a ton of slow grinding before she can actually become useful in a fight. Suddenly, he notices a second character card in the pool and inspects it, only to be completely stunned when the unit flashing on his screen turns out to be a literal clone of himself. He realizes the game has actually registered him as an in-game unit, which means he can directly share experience points and levels with his pulls, and that he can share experience points with the rest of his roster. With this breakthrough, he realizes that if he can just properly grid and level up the Berserker Sword Maiden, his own stats will skyrocket right alongside hers, which might actually be his golden ticket to bust out of this prison. He quickly opens up his item inventory and realizes he already has the absolute perfect setup of enhancement materials to start buffing his new unit. That's when he notices a mechanic stating that the operator's mood directly impacts their overall training efficiency, meaning the happier and more motivated the character is, the more insanely powerful they can ultimately become. So now, he literally has to micromanage this girl's mental state and make sure she's living her best life, even though his own execution is literally around the corner. After successfully boosting the girl's mood meter, he goes ahead and locks in the Berserker Sword Maiden into the official Sorcerer Manual. The exact moment he hits confirm, the AFK training simulation for the Berserker Sword Maiden kicks off. Inside the cell, Ash tries his best to sit tight and wait it out, but the sheer exhaustion from today's wild chaos completely catches up to him. Meanwhile, in a completely different region 3 hours behind Ash's current time zone, a young girl, who had turned in early to hit her nighttime skincare routine, suddenly gets sucked into a bizarre, vivid dream. She finds herself standing right in front of a mysterious dude, who has a giant sword straight up impaled through his chest. Sonia tries to take a sip of water from a nearby lake, only to find out it tastes super sweet, instantly confirming that she is, no cap, inside a dream world. She wonders why a literal dead body is chilling in her subconscious, and gets low-key curious about who this guy actually is. She reaches out and grabs the handle of the sword stuck inside him, thinking about how incredibly well it fits her grip, almost like it was custom forged specifically for her hands. But right at that exact moment, the corpse suddenly twitches and slowly begins to rise from the dead, completely breaking Sonia out. He introduces himself as the final observer and tells her to relax because he's not hostile, so there's absolutely no reason to panic. However, after pausing for a dramatic beat, a sinister, evil grin slowly spreads across his face as he straight up announces his plans to murder her. He gives her a 72-hour deadline, stating she can only wake up from this nightmare if she somehow manages to beat him in a fight. Feeling totally threatened, Sonya gets into a battle stance as the final observer draws his blade, ready to make a peek move, and blitzes her with a lightning-fast strike, coldly letting her know she's got exactly 10 seconds to catch her breath. Sonya stands there completely dazed, not even sure if she just got hit, especially since there isn't a single scratch on her skin, even though the phantom pain felt entirely real. Noting her utter confusion, the final observer breaks it down for her, explaining that they are locked into a shared mental space. And just like that, her 10 seconds are officially up. He instantly cars her up with another brutal slash, and mockingly grants her another 10-second timeout. With her own blade completely out of arm's reach, she makes a desperate choice to plunge straight into the lake, gambling on the idea that the observer won't be able to touch her down there. Holding her breath beneath the surface, she frantically tries to swim away from her tormentor, who thinks her tactical retreat is straight up pathetic and totally pointless. Soon enough, her lungs start begging for oxygen, forcing her to break the surface of the water, just to gasp for air for a split second. However, the observer still manages to absolutely fold her by chucking his blade and sniping her right through the water. She frantically clutches her face to make sure her jaw is still attached, all while the observer ruthlessly roasts her for failing to learn her lesson after getting completely wiped out by his hands so many times. Staring at that punchable, arrogant smirk, Sonya is low-key losing her mind. But out of nowhere, she throws him a massive curveball by dropping straight to her knees and begging for mercy. With tears literally welling up in her eyes, she implores him to stop this endless, agonizing loop, swearing up and down that she'll do whatever he wants. The observer just hitches a cruel smile, telling her flat out that the only way he's ever letting her off the hook is if she clutches up and actually beats him in a duel. Losing her absolute cool, she storms right up in his face and aggressively demands to know why he is so utterly obsessed with murdering her when she hasn't even done a single thing to cross him. She tries to logically explain that there are way worse villains out there he could be hunting down instead. She plays the victim card, crying out that she's just a weak, innocent girl who has zero clue what's going on. However, the observer drops a bomb, telling her she definitely wronged him in the past, before instantly sending her back to the spawn screen with another attack. While desperately trying to recover, Sonya asks him if just surviving inside this nightmare for the full 72 hours would finally serve as her ultimate escape hatch. The observer tells her that's true, but in a realm of constant execution, 72 hours is a literal eternity, and he dares her to see if she can handle getting flatlined on repeat. He also raises the question of why she'd even believe a single word coming out of his mouth when his sole purpose is to spawn kill her. On top of that, even if she somehow clutches up and outlasts the night, there is absolutely zero guarantee that she won't just get completely folded the very next evening. He grips the hilt of his blade once more, coldly reminding her that once you've already tasted total annihilation, hoping for a miracle is just straight-up copium. In a literal blink of an eye, the observer lets out a massive swing right her throat. But in an absolute plot twist, Sonya actually parries the incoming death blow with her own weapon. Still, Sonya continues to get absolutely wrecked on repeat. As she gears up for the next round, she starts reflecting on the legendary God-tier sword masters who push their blade skills to the absolute peak. So much so that even their most basic, casual swings would strike pure terror into anyone. She tells herself that no cap, this observer dude is nowhere near the level of those elite monsters, meaning she definitely still has a fighting chance to secure the dub. The shallow cut she managed to score on the observer's flesh instantly patches itself up like magic. Sonya just smirks, realizing this dream dimension is giving her absolutely zero room to exploit any kind of unfair advantage. She initiates the next clash by aggressively rushing him, just as she called it. The observer leads with his signature opening strike, allowing her to easily read it and read option block it. They get locked into a furious sequence of trading slashes, all while Sonya is mentally counting down to 5. The exact millisecond she hits 5, she unleashes a heavy, powered-up strike, though the observer still manages to slickly dodge out of the way. However, overextending her stance like that leaves her completely wide open for the observer to counterattack. But Sonya smiles because she completely anticipated this bait, effortlessly dodging his blade with a clean sidestep. While the observer is still locked in the middle of his swing animation, Sonya spots the perfect, unpunishable opening to carve him up. She proudly yells that she has completely memorized his entire move set. After getting flatlined by him a million times, she delivers an absolute banger of a strike that packs so much force. It literally sends the observer flying back into a wall. The massive gash on the observer's chest heals up instantly, prompting Sonya to ask if landing that clean hit officially counts as his defeat. The observer confirms that it does and actually gives her props, letting her breathe a sigh of relief, only to immediately drop the bomb, as she still has to beat him in a real fight, as he dual wields a pair of lethal blades, summoning yet another weapon into his grip, to lock into a terrifying dual sword combat stance. He ruthlessly announces that the second round starts right now, warning her that those 10-second safety windows are officially gone for the rest of this match. Just then, Sonya hears a distant voice calling out her name, instantly snapping her awake from the horrific nightmare. Looking absolutely drained, her roommate Ingrid drops a reality check that it's already 7 in the morning, meaning she needs to hustle and get ready for her gen ed lecture. Sonya groans, telling her she just had the worst nightmare ever. But Ingrid basically tells her it's not that deep. Before heading out the door for class, Sonya mindlessly goes through her usual morning routine and drags herself over to the lecture hall. She's just one of a massive crowd of students packed into the auditorium, staring blankly at the professor up on the stage. But while she's mechanically scribbling down her notes, her mind keeps drifting back to that intense clash with the observer, wondering if that whole ordeal was no cap, just a crazy dream. She vividly recalls how, the exact moment she finally managed to score a win against him, he ominous warned her that her real trial was just getting started. Sonya vows right then and there that she won't let this phantom rent-free dude dictate her life. Meanwhile, Ash is just opening his eyes inside his high-end luxury cell, located deep within Kaimon City's notorious Shattered Lake prison. He's completely thrown off by why he feels so incredibly exhausted, and straight up folded despite getting a solid 8 hours of sleep. He pulls up his floating holographic screen, where a flashing alert from the Sorcerer Manual app brings him some massive news, stating that his synergy level with the Berserker Sword Maiden has officially leveled up. He's low-key shocked that setting up simple AFK training boosts their relationship stats this fast, feeling glad that he already pre-scheduled her entire daily itinerary beforehand, and he's fully ready to let his top-tier Sword Maiden keep grinding. Right at that moment, Sonya suddenly feels a sharp, blinding ache spike through her chest. But despite the random physical agony, she forces herself to stand up and tackle the professor's complex prompt. Flashing a perfectly bright smile, she leaves the entire room completely stunned by flawlessly nailing the answer to a super advanced question. One particular guy in the crowd can't help himself, whispering to his buddy about how she's the ultimate package of elite looks and big brains. Sonya takes a quick beat to introduce herself to the audience, sharing a bit about her incredibly modest background. Hailing from a completely obscure backwater village, she reflects on grinding through her basic educational courses, which miraculously earned her a spot at the prestigious Swordflower University. She proudly brags that she was literally the sole individual from her entire hometown to actually get accepted into the academy in over 2 whole decades. On the very first day she stepped foot on campus, everyone was low-key throwing shade, whispering about how she looked like a total country bumpkin as she walked past them. But after just a single month, she completely mastered makeup, leveled up her wardrobe game, and totally wiped out her rural accent, clutching up to become the absolute main character student she is today. Thanks to her top-tier visuals, she locked down a ton of part-time gigs and blew up in popularity, constantly diving into every single campus club and hosting major university events, basically turning into a certified school celebrity. Strolling through the campus courtyard, she looks back at her freshman self entering these gates and laughs at how incredibly clueless and green she used to be. She heads out toward the main entrance to meet up with someone, spatting her mom, who instantly shouts out her old name, Linda. Sonya quickly corrects her, telling her to use her upgraded city name. The daughter is incredibly hyped to show her mom around the massive metropolis, immediately taking her on a scenic train ride while they're cruising along the tracks. Sonya points out the pristine streets, the massive, towering skyscrapers, and the insane luxury sports cars that originally blew her mind when she first arrived. She vividly remembers how completely overwhelmed she felt, just seeing how sophisticated the locals were, and watching those giant LED billboards blasting colorful ads, 24/7 without a break. Now, she just looks over and smiles at how genuinely happy her mom is, soaking in the breathtaking city skyline. Sonia reflects on how her mom single-handedly raised her. After her abusive, deadbeat dad finally kicked the bucket, she pictures her mom grinding through brutal manual labor out on the farm day in and day out, just so Sonia could focus 100% of her energy on studying. Sonia knows she got incredibly lucky, considering most of the local kids were forced to work miserable factory shifts and ended up trapped in that tiny backwater town for the rest of their lives. As she leads her mom deeper into the heart of the city, she vows to make sure she experiences the absolute peak luxury lifestyle. Sonia takes her to a hyped-up gourmet food truck, then hits up a trendy boutique clothing store, where she insists on buying her mom a beautiful new dress. Next, she tries to treat her to a high-end, 5-star restaurant. But her mom completely rejects the idea, not wanting her to waste cash. Ultimately, they just chill out on a park bench together, happily munching on snacks right next to a beautiful fountain. A little bit later, Sonia walks her mom all the way back to the train platform, so she can catch her ride back to their quiet little village. Before she boards, Sonia begs her to stay for just one more night. But her mom gently shuts it down, confessing that the fast-paced city life just low-key stresses her out. Sonia promises that she'll treat her to another big city trip in the future, and eventually hook her up with a straight-up luxury lifestyle. Her mom tightly squeezes her hand, telling her she has absolute 100% faith in her, and knows she's going to make it big. She reminds her daughter, though, that no matter how crazy things get, she can always head back to the countryside, where a hot, home-cooked meal will always be waiting on the table. She looks at Sonia and softly admits that she feels like the city is way too overwhelming, suggesting it might actually be a better move to just come back home and enjoy a nice, peaceful existence. She slides her daughter a pouch stuffed with cash, explaining that she barely spends a dime back in the village anyway. As her mom steps onto the train carriage, she tells her daughter not to worry because she's doing great. Sonia peeks inside the pouch to check the cash and notices her mom even packs some of her favorite candy inside. But the exact moment she slips the money into her tote bag, a sketchy dude slowly creeps up right behind her. The guy slickly pulls out a tiny razor blade and slices a clean opening right through the fabric of her bag. Without missing a beat, Sonia delivers a brutal hand chop to his wrist, forcing the thief to instantly drop his weapon, without giving the loser a single glance. Sonia just turns around and walks out of the station. She heads straight into the center of the crowded downtown streets, just to lose herself in the glowing neon lights and insane energy of the metropolis. She tells herself, no cap, that this chaotic, cutthroat city life is exactly where she thrives. Fast forward to late that night, and Sonia is using all her charm to convince the campus security guard to open up the main gates for her, even though she is way past her strict dorm curfew. After putting on a masterclass performance to win his sympathy, he finally lets her slide. As she struts across the dark quad, she hits a confident smirk, knowing damn well that her insane visuals were the ultimate weapon to get her inside. She reflects on how peak aesthetics are the ultimate cheat code in this world, believing her looks are the #1 reason she's managed to successfully finesse her way into high society. Heading up the stairwell toward her floor, she gives a silent shout-out to her mom for buying her those stylish jeans that helped her blend in so perfectly. But as she gets closer to her room, she catches the voice of one of her toxic roommates, gossiping about how incredibly late Sonia is getting back, straight up assuming that she's probably out somewhere trying to flirt with a wealthy sugar daddy. Sonia instantly presses her ear flat against the door to get a better listen to her hater roommate, who just keeps throwing absolute shade and talking trash. The jealous girl inside then brings up how she spotted Sonia hanging out with her mom just outside the school gates, maliciously speculating that her own mother must be completely embarrassed by her. This completely crosses the line, sending Sonia into a total rage, and she grabs the handle, ready to bust the door open and crash their little party. But right as she's about to aggressively confront them, a massive, booming thud echoes from inside, instantly shutting the gossip girl up. Suddenly, Ingrid swings the door wide open, coldly wishes Sonia a good evening, and just struts right past her. Sonia peeks her head inside the room and spots a fresh, steaming impact dent on a heavy punching bag, hanging right next to the entrance. She instantly realizes Ingrid clutched up and leveled that bag just to force those fake friends to shut up. The only two people left in the room are her main rival roommate, Lois, alongside her insecure little minion, Adele. Sonia breaks down the dynamic, explaining that Lois is the spoiled daughter of a wealthy local merchant, someone who is constantly dropping passive-aggressive, low-key insults about Sonia's humble, rural upbringing. Sonia reflects on the fact that she effortlessly pulls way more attention from guys than Lois ever could, no matter how hard Lois tries to act. Like she's the undisputed top-tier baddie of the entire dorm. And when Sonia clutched up the coveted main host spot for a massive campus festival, Lois's burning jealousy completely went off the charts. From that moment on, Lois started aggressively throwing exclusive parties for the water magic majors and treating the entire class to high-end, luxury dinners, while explicitly keeping Sonia off the guest list. Thanks to all those calculated social maneuvers, a bunch of guys eventually started chasing after Lois instead. Lois ended up falling hard for a popular upperclassman who was actually getting ready to shoot his shot with her. But then, Sonia intentionally crossed paths with the dude, instantly finessing his attention so hard that he started chasing her instead. In the end, she straight up rejected the senior, knowing damn well that Lois's massive pride would never let her chase a guy that a supposed country bumpkin wouldn't even deem worth dating. Honestly, in Sonia's mind, she did Lois a massive favor and helped her dodge a bullet. By keeping her far away from such a basic, boring loser, Sonia has massive ambitions of locking down a wealthy man to act as her ultimate shortcut straight into high society. To pull this off, she's dead set on becoming a water sorceress, mostly because her research shows that water magic users have a highest success rate of marrying into nobility. She plans to fully exploit Swordflower University's legendary reputation for churning out elite sword, wind, and water sorcerers, so she can graduate as a top-tier water mage. She's already daydreaming about meeting a rich nobleman who will proudly introduce her to his high society mother. She actively chose to stay far away from the sword sorcery track, firmly believing that developing a buff, muscular physique is a major disadvantage for women looking for a husband. In her master plan, she envisions a future where she successfully summons her very first water spirit by next year and fully awakens her silver wings right before graduation to officially claim her title as a winged sorcerer. From there, she'll finesse her way into an exclusive campus mixer over at Truth University to reel in a high-status young noble. She notes that Truth University is undisputed as the #1 elite academy in all of Galaxis, a place where literally everyone is stacked with cash and power, making it the absolute peak hunting ground to find a boyfriend. While mapping out her golden future, she grinds through her textbooks while wiping off her makeup. She reflects on the insane amount of time and money it takes just to maintain her current baddie aesthetic, but she wholeheartedly believes, no cap, that she will bag a top-tier husband from the upper echelon and give her mom the absolute luxury life of a noblewoman. Suddenly, she gets jump-scared by a familiar voice, telling her she needs to stop slacking and go practice her swordsmanship. She whips her head around to find where the sound came from and freezes when she sees the observer, who tells her they should communicate strictly through telepathy using their minds. Sonia glances around the dorm room and realizes that Lois and Adele are completely oblivious to the observer's presence, even though the dude is literally standing right next to them. The observer reassures Sonia that he's not trying to oppose her, holding up a vial filled with a glowing green liquid, which he claims she needs to down immediately. Sonia fires back in her head, telling him there's zero chance she's drinking that sketchy fluid. The observer just shrugs and dumps the liquid straight onto the floor, but instead of splashing on the ground, it teleports right into Sonia's throat, forcing her to swallow. The potion instantly hijacks her muscles, forcing her body to stand right up. The observer then manifests a wooden practice blade, telling her it's time to start grinding out her sword drills. She glares at him with pure defiance, telling him straight up, on repeat, that she absolutely refuses to do it. However, her body suddenly moves on autopilot, getting her fully dressed. She snatches up the wooden practice blade and exits the dorm. As she walks out through the corridor, Sonia can low-key hear Lois gossiping in the background, claiming she's probably sneaking out to thirst trap some popular upperclassman who majors in elite sword sorcery. Sonia ultimately finds herself at the university's main training arena, where a bunch of students are sweating and grinding out their blade combos against heavy armor dummies. Among the crowd is Ingrid, who is already drenched in sweat. Ingrid is feeling super proud of her own progression, firmly believing she'll crack into the 10th tier ring by next month and finally summon a broken sword spirit. Still, she checks her ego so she doesn't get too cocky, bitterly reminding herself that she has to keep grinding every single day to truly level up. The exact moment Sonia steps into the arena, she completely stops traffic, making every single swordsman turn their head. As she struts right past them, They're all whispering, wondering why a baddie like her is even visiting the gym. Suddenly, Sonya starts absolutely wailing on one of the practice dummies. With her wooden blade, Ingrid observes her form, instantly reading that her technique is still totally unpolished and way too sluggish. Ingrid reflects on how real female sword mages have to build up calloused hands and an incredibly shredded physique to unlock peak power, and wonders if a girl like Sonya is actually ready to throw away her aesthetic for that. Then it hits her. She wonders if Sonya is just doing this to bag a high-tier boyfriend, realizing her target is almost definitely Felix, the prodigy sword magic apprentice, who is literally staring a hole through her while she trains right now. Ingrid notes that Felix is the golden heir to the legendary Vaslada family, one of the core pillars running the elite Stellaris Council. Basically top-tier, unreachable nobility. She recalls that his dad, the legendary Duke Vaslada, monopolizes the most advanced steelworks industry in all of Stellaris, making him one of the most high-status, influential power brokers in the entire realm. Ingrid low-key worries that Sonya is setting her sights on a toxic player, but regardless, she's just happy to see another girl joining the sword grind club. She keeps studying Sonya's weird pacing against the enchanted training dummy, only to realize with absolute shock that she has already clipped the edge of the first ring on the bullseye after just a couple of minutes. Staring intensely, Ingrid suddenly notices that, even though Sonya's execution is totally unpolished and draining, she is strictly following every single rule in the sword magic playbook. She low-key worries that if Sonya keeps pushing this insane pace, she's going to completely gas out and collapse in a matter of minutes. She starts keeping tabs on Sonya's reps to help her stay in the zone. But after literally hundreds of strikes, Ingrid completely loses count and is now just hyper-fixated on her friend's mind-blowing grind. After a hot minute, the entire training arena is just standing there staring at her, completely jaw-dropped. The crowd starts doing the math, estimating that she's been wailing on that dummy for a straight 90 minutes and has somehow already cleared over 2,400 consecutive hits. Right on cue, Felix's girlfriend, Cecilia, struts into the facility, fully expecting to see a crowd hyping up her man, because he's doing something absolutely cracked. Instead, she is completely blindsided to see that Felix is just one of the many fanboys, gawking at Sonya, and she can tell by the look on his face that the girl is living completely rent-free in his head. Cecilia takes one look at Sonya and immediately hates, assuming she's just caked in makeup purely to thirst trap all the guys in the room. She gets immediately stressed that Sonya is hunting for Felix with this whole fake swordsman routine, and instantly plans to drag her boyfriend away from the scene. Cecilia snidely asks why everyone is wasting their time watching Sonya. But Felix quickly shuts her down and drops some facts, revealing that Sonya walked in about an hour and a half ago, as a total amateur with the most garbage, unpolished stance he'd ever seen. But now she's out here casually slicing through 9 rings of the target, with one single peak sword strike. Cecilia scoffingly asks if she was probably just faking being a beginner for clout. Felix admits that he originally thought the exact same thing, which is why he started hate-watching her routine, just to see the exact moment she'd hit a wall and fail. But he confesses that after studying her for an hour and a half straight, his initial skepticism has completely turned into pure, unadulterated admiration. Cecilia feels immensely threatened that some random chick can capture Felix's undivided attention that effortlessly. But then she realizes that grinding at full intensity for 90 minutes straight is actually humanly impossible, noting that even a prodigy like Felix can only handle 3 hours of max effort when he's taking regular rest intervals. Cecilia looks around the room and sees all these meathead guys who are normally only obsessed with their own gym gains, completely pausing their workouts just to cheer Sonya on like she's a literal goddess. As she keeps absolutely wailing on the practice dummy, Cecilia slowly lets go of Felix's arm, feeling like she just took a massive, humiliating L to Sonya in the battle for Felix's undivided attention. Finally, Sonya lands a precise blow dead center on the 10th ring. The entire room is losing their minds, staring in absolute shock as that final 10th tier strike connects. Sonya's dummy straight up explodes into pieces, and the crowd goes absolutely wild. As Sonya finally takes a second to catch her breath, she notices that her stats just skyrocketed, putting her way closer to summoning a broken sword spirit and officially unlocking her high-tier wing sorcerer status. She's hyped, realizing her grand plan of securing a worry-free luxury lifestyle is low-key right around the corner. Ingrid slides over to hand her a bottle of water. But out of nowhere, Sonia feels that familiar fluid forced down her throat again. She frantically looks across the gym and spots Felix staring. But right behind him, she sees the ghostly image of the observer. The dude just dumped another mysterious potion right onto the floor. And just like last time, the observer telepathically tells her that the grind never stops, and that her next mission is to completely fold Felix in a duel. The observer breaks it down for her, explaining that he simply wants to match her up against the most cracked, OP fighter in the entire arena. He's even giggling over the fact that this top-tier boss happens to be an elite high-society noble, since nothing makes him happier than watching trust fund babies get absolutely wrecked. Sonia desperately begs to switch her opponent to literally anyone else, since getting mixed up with a high-profile guy like Felix is a massive red flag. She notes that everyone knows Felix is the biggest player on the entire Sword Flower University campus. She constantly sees him flexing in a different luxury sports car and switching out his girlfriends every 3 business days. According to her Middleburn book, Felix basically treats collecting beautiful girls like a hobby. Plus, she finds it incredibly sketchy that the literal heir to the legendary Duke of Vaslada is stuck here at a mid-tier academy like Swordflower, instead of flexing his smarts at the elite Truth University, meaning the guy is almost certainly wrapped up in some heavy, toxic political drama behind the scenes. She warns the observer straight up that Felix is a dangerous villain who will ruin her life. Too bad for her, because the observer thinks that makes it peak entertainment, and the absolute perfect matchup for her to test her skills. He hypes her up to go absolutely demolish this sword prodigy and kick this arrogant Stellaris noble straight to the curb. But even with the system forcing her hands, Sonia vows in her head that she will absolutely never crash out like that. Her hand still forces her to level that wooden practice blade right at Felix, straight up calling him out for an immediate 1v1. The spectators absolutely lose their minds, while Cecilia is low-key throwing a tantrum inside, convinced that Sonia is orchestrating this whole scene just to clout chase and force her way into Felix's life. At the exact same time, Sonia is having a literal mental breakdown, screaming in her own head that she has zero desire to throw hands with this guy, even though her rogue body is out here aggressively keeping the weapon locked onto him. Ingrid steps in to check her friend, reminding Sonia that she's completely running on fumes after pushing a brutal, non-stop 2-hour training session, suggesting it's a much safer bet to postpone the clash until tomorrow. But Felix shuts that down instantly, insisting that this fight needs to drop right now. His logic is simple. He recognizes her as the most naturally cracked, god-tier prodigy he has ever witnessed, and admits she's only the second person in his entire life to actually make him feel terror. He's convinced that if he chickened out and waited until the morning, he'd lose his absolute nerve and wouldn't even have the courage to unsheath his weapon. In front of her again, Felix draws his high-tier blade and levels it dead at Sonia, swearing on everything that he's securing a dub against her tonight, no matter what it takes. The entire room instantly notices that Felix is booting up the legendary wave sword. Combatid. Sonia's internal database immediately clicks, recalling that the elite Vaslada bloodline is world-renowned for possessing 4 forbidden, secret sword arts, capable of summoning literal god-tier spirits. And this wave stance is one of their most broken setups. Sonia settles into a completely basic standard guard, bracing for impact while furiously screaming at the observer inside her mind, arguing that securing a win against Felix doesn't even mean anything if her body is just being puppeted by his hack system anyway. She tries to bargain with him, begging to get her manual controls back, so she can just forfeit and go find a completely different opponent to bully. But the observer drops an absolute reality check, revealing that he was never actually puppeteering her body in the first place, leaving her completely jaw-dropped. He breaks down the truth, explaining that she went crazy on that training dummy, entirely on her own accord, because after she completely folded him in that nightmare last night, her inner genius for blade combat finally unlocked. He analyzes her true motives, pointing out that she dragged herself to this arena purely to push her stats to the absolute limit. Also, Ingrid and the rest of the academy could finally witness that she possesses a broken, god-tier talent she can actually be proud of, one that goes way deeper than just a pretty face. Sonia dashes forward, colliding with Felix as they start trading lightning-fast blows. The observer's voice echoes rent-free in her mind, reminding her that she threw down this challenge entirely of her own free will, mostly because she despised this privileged trust fund baby from start. for constantly being the center of attention on campus. Felix can instantly read from his opponent's insane reaction time that she is remarkably strong, but he refuses to back down, amping up his hyper-aggressive offense. Fully confident that Sonya is still no match for his broken wave sword style, as his relentless flurry of strikes forces Sonya to fall back. While she's on the defensive, the observer rent-free reminds her that, no matter how naturally cracked or gifted she might be, Felix is still an unbeatable boss because of his inherited wave stance. He low-key triggers her by emphasizing that there are privileged elites born with literally everything, who are destined to outshine her in every single aspect of life. This reality check drives her into absolute peak overdrive, matching Felix's speed, and making him wonder how on earth she still has this much stamina left in the tank. Realizing he needs to wrap this up, Felix decides to end the match right here, and starts channeling a massive amount of magical energy throughout his body. As a blinding radiant light illuminates the entire arena, the observer keeps whispering to Sonya, reminding her that she's the one who willingly gripped that wooden training blade, dragged herself to these training grounds under her own power, and confidently challenged the most OP fighter in the room, all just to prove to the world that she isn't inferior to anyone. Then, out of absolute nowhere, to the collective shock of the entire crowd, Sonya perfectly mimics and copies Felix's exact wave stance setup. The spectators are completely jaw-dropped, marveling at how she finessed a secret technique. After literally just seeing it once mid-fight, Cecilia instantly copes, thinking Sonya's grand scheme is to humiliate Felix first, then throw the match on purpose just to guarantee a rematch down the line, and maximize her chances of getting close to him. Both fighters suddenly blitz forward, throwing down their absolute ultimate moves. A deafening, explosive boom echoes out from their massive collision, and a splintered shard of a shattered wooden sword clatters onto the floor. It turns out to be Sonya's weapon that completely folded under the pressure. The crowd immediately looks over at Felix's left shoulder and spots a glowing wave sword spirit manifested right beside him, completely hyped that he successfully clutched up his soul-bound spirit in the heat of battle. Ingrid runs over to comfort Sonya, telling her not to sweat the loss, since she's clearly on track to summon her own spirit super soon. But Sonya firmly tells the room that she didn't actually lose, though the crowd just assumes she's huffing pure copium and being stubborn. Suddenly, the very tip of Felix's wooden blade snaps off and breaks apart as well, and right over Sonya's right shoulder, a massive, radiant wave sword spirit manifests into reality. The crowd literally cannot believe their eyes. She mastered Felix's signature style mid-combat and summoned a high-tier spirit on her very first try. Right after that, all the tryhards who spent actual years grinding to master the blade instantly get depressed and lose all motivation, realizing they're standing in the presence of a literal god-tier genius. Sonya glances over the stunned crowd and spots the observer quietly smirking, watching her complete transformation. In her mind, she questions him, asking if he's just some random byproduct of her subconscious mind, a total hallucination. Instead of answering, the observer casually bends down, scoops up the broken shard of the wooden blade right off the floor, and instantly fuses it back onto Sonya's weapon. As his spectral figure slowly starts fading away into nothingness, he mockingly tells her she'll just have to keep guessing what he truly is. This completely triggers Sonya, who starts aggressively cursing him out in her head. Meanwhile, far away from the arena, Ash is staring at his glowing hollow screen, realizing his Berserker Sword Maiden character has just leveled up a crazy amount of times and unlocked a whole bag of broken abilities, including that OP wave stance and the elite wave sword spirit. He spots a brand new title called One-Winged Sword Sorcerer, instantly theorizing that adding more wings to her build basically translates to unlocking insane superpower buffs. Watching his custom Sword Maiden pull off such a massive glow-up makes Ash feel like setting his alarm for 6 a.m. just to check her daily progress was an absolute banger of a choice. But even though his character is out here hyper-leveling, Ash realizes his own physical stats haven't increased even a little bit. He instantly feels like he got completely scammed by the developers, low-key speculating that this garbage progression might be because he's a strictly free-to-play user, especially since this company's titles are infamous no-cap for being a literal unplayable nightmare unless you swipe your credit card. Suddenly, the automated AI voice of the prison breaks the silence, informing Ash that his clearance level has been upgraded to allow free movement in designated sectors. His heavy cell door instantly slides open, and the system cordially invites him to head down to the mess hall for breakfast. Confused, Ash brings up the official Shattered Lake inmate handbook on his hollow display to figure out what the catch is. Reading through the manual's absurd list of 5-star prison amenities, he seriously starts to think the wardens are playing a giant prank on him. The whole setup feels way too good to be true, making him incredibly suspicious of what's actually going on. He cautiously creeps out of his cell to scout the perimeter, but noticing the total lack of any security guards patrolling the corridor only makes the atmosphere 10 times more terrifying. He sprints all the way to the edge of the hallway, where he stumbles upon a massive indoor park packed with inmates, just chilling out. The moment he spots an actual prison guard lounging on one of the sofas, Ash lets out a massive sigh of relief, thinking he at least has someone to scream for if things go south. He knows he desperately needs some form of protection, since he still hasn't inherited any shared XP from his OP sword maiden yet. Now that his anxiety is low-key settling down, he wanders through the facility to locate the cafeteria. As he looks around, he spots a group of hardened inmates, hyper-focused on a live political press conference, broadcasting across a massive LED display. And he's stunned to see literal orc and goblin inmates, debating high-level government policies like total experts. Out of nowhere, a sketchy convict approaches Ash and claims that he instantly recognized him as the infamous high-status leader of the Four Pillars cult. The guy introduces himself as Igor, explaining that Ash's face has been plastered all over the prison media network lately. Igor extends his hand for a formal handshake, slickly inviting Ash to get in on their upcoming prison break scheme. Ash is completely down bad for a way out, so he enthusiastically agrees on the spot. But right as their hands are about to lock, a woman's voice rings out, telling Ash she would straight up deck Igor in the jaw if she were in his shoes. Ash whips his head around toward the speaker, and is completely jaw-dropped to see that her face and voice are a 100% exact match for his customized sword maiden. Taking her advice to heart, he winds up fully prepared to clock Igor. But the exact millisecond Ash lunges forward to strike his fellow inmate, the high-tech compliance chip embedded in his neck violently flashes, systematically warning him that harming a registered citizen is strictly illegal. Deafening red alert sirens start blasting rent-free inside his skull, spamming the exact same error message over and over. Then, his knuckles freeze just inches away from crashing into Igor's face. His entire body is locked down by the system, completely paralyzed, leaving the smug young punk to openly mock his pathetic, aborted swing. Assuming the new guy is just totally content with spending his life behind bars, the thug rolls his eyes, turns around, and walks away. Right after that, the freshman inmate finally feels the digital paralysis lift, allowing him to move. Scoffing at his weak performance, the Phantom Sword Maiden asks why he's acting so incredibly shocked. She breaks down how the neck implant instantly read his brain waves and completely neutralized his offensive capabilities before impact. She admits this high-tech setup is actually brilliant, acting as a flawless deterrent to keep the peace. And while raw physical combat and high-tier magic are heavily nerfed in here, she warns him that there are still plenty of broken loopholes convicts can abuse, like using a soul spirit to force a binding magical contract, which is exactly how Igor operates as a disguised succubus. By blindly agreeing to his deal and accepting that shady invitation to partner up, he was basically signing away his absolute free will. To put it plainly, clutching that dude's hand a second ago would have literally turned him into a mindless slave. Ash shudders, realizing this place is way more toxic than his previous world, where companies at least had to use standard corporate labor agreements. Shifting gears, Ash starts to wonder if the surrounding crowd is completely blind to her presence. Sure, he can chat with her telepathically without any restrictions, but to the rest of the yard, he's going to look like a total schizo, talking to thin air. Not giving a single care about looking crazy, he keeps the conversation rolling, and double-checks to confirm she's legitimately his real-life sword maiden. She completely gets why he's skeptical, admitting she would have low-key questioned his identity as the mysterious observer too if she hadn't seen him with her own eyes. They immediately start bickering about how neither of them looks exactly like their official in-game character art, but honestly, it's only natural for people to switch up their outfits every once in a while. Ash totally misreads the entire vibe, though, and boldly orders her to clutch up and bust him out of this facility, only to get left completely stunned when she gives him a flat-out rejection. The Sword Maiden scoffs, asking why on earth she'd ever break him out, when this cell is the absolute perfect place for a useless, lazy bum like him. In fact, she points out he could literally retire early and live out his dream aesthetic of doing absolutely nothing by just staying put. The young man fires back, arguing that he was framed and is currently facing some cosmic moon judgment. But as she straight up laughs in his face, he starts whining and tries to pull rank, calling himself her superior. However, his tough guy act is instantly cut short. The second she glares a hole through his soul, asking him what he thinks he is to her. Exactly, daring him to finish that sentence if he values his life. She aggressively pokes his forehead multiple times in a literal flash, and her strikes pack so much hidden physical force that he gets slammed straight backward onto a nearby couch. Invading his personal space, she brings her face inches from his, staring down at him with pure menace, as she asks if he was seriously about to refer to himself as her master. With his smile completely wiped away, he silently wonders why that's such a crazy thing to assume. After all, she's literally just a virtual mobile game character, and without him acting as the active player, she would completely cease to exist. The way he breaks down their dynamic makes her expression drop into pure dark rage, leaving him with absolutely zero options but to just grit his teeth and take the heat. Finally raising his voice, Ash snaps that he isn't trying to be her master, but he makes it clear as day that he's definitely not going to be her servant either. He tells her that if she can't treat him with basic respect as an equal partner, then she can go right back to being basic digital data inside his phone. The Sword Maiden locks eyes with him, silently studying his resolve for a tense moment, before her icy frown slowly melts into a smug, knowing smirk. She nonchalantly turns away, agreeing that no cap, she is just a virtual entity, manifested directly from his own mind. However, she warns him to never forget his own words about him, never trying to claim ownership over her as a master. She demands the young man make a binding vow right then and there, warning him he'll be cursed to lose his face for an entire decade if he ever breaks his word, all while he stares back without a single shred of doubt. He follows her lead and locks in the oath with a confident, satisfied grin. She tells him to walk and talk at the same time, noting that instead of plotting some grand escape, they're hitting the cafeteria first since his stomach is low-key growling. That being said, she admits she couldn't actually break him out even if she wanted to. Being completely invisible, untouchable, and entirely unable to interact with the physical world, there is absolutely zero chance she could finesse a jailbreak. The only reason she's even manifesting right now is due to the magical link connecting them as Sword, Maiden, and Observer. It was finally time to sync up and dump all the crazy EXP she farmed while being forced to grind out those brutal training drills. Hyped AF, he spreads his arms wide, ready to absorb all the power, but she instantly kills his vibe and chews him out, calling him a clown for thinking he can just effortlessly harvest the fruits of her literal blood, sweat, and tears. Confused as to how he's actually supposed to claim the stats, Ash is told he needs to go throw hands with other prisoners, so the combat experience can naturally fuse into his own body. Eagerly scanning the yard for a victim, he immediately spots a target to provoke. The guy is a total unit, tatted up, covered in battle scars, and looking like a high-tier raid boss who's deleted hundreds of people, basically begging for confrontation. The rookie convict purposely slaps the giant's glass of milk right over, splashing it completely all over the dude's face, before dropping a totally fake, half-hearted apology. But even though he went out of his way to instigate the beef, the sudden wave of demonic aura leaking from the giant makes him shake in pure terror. Yet to his absolute bewilderment, this terrifying monster of a man just cutely tells him to be more careful next time, and casually recommends he try the cafeteria's strawberry flavor instead. Completely jaw-dropped and flabbergasted, Ash just follows instructions, grabs his lunch tray, and hits the line. As he sits down at a table with his meal laid out, a loud, mocking burst of laughter echoes in his ears. The Sword Maiden is straight up cackling, completely unable to contain herself. After witnessing such a ridiculous, backfired scenario, she explains that thanks to those high-tech compliance implants in their necks, literally any form of hostility is strictly nerfed. Even accidental microaggressions, any attempt to override the system or tamper with the tech, will instantly hit their bodies with a heart-stopping electric shock. This means he'll have to find a loophole to trigger a real battle, without relying on her to spoon-feed him, deciding to troll him like a strict mom. She acts like a toddler, mimicking him asking for his baby bottle, but her mock attack packs so much force it literally sends him flying backward. He lands right back into the giant inmate from before, and this accidental crash into gives him the ultimate chance to finally get acquainted. and ask around directly for some insider info, totally misinterpreting his friendliness as something else. The massive unit blushes and says he's already taken and has a boyfriend. Ash desperately tries to clarify, but the whole situation just gets more awkward. While the guy is low-key a total sweetheart, the massive inmate is 100% loyal to his man and won't complicate things. Moving past the awkwardness, they finally get to our boy's actual question, even though they still haven't completely moved past the flirting misunderstanding. Ash has absolutely no choice but to cut him off mid-sentence and straight up ask if there's any possible way to throw hands in this prison. Lang's entire expression instantly shifts, and he grins, telling Ash he came to the absolute right person if he's down to put his muscles to work. Turns out, he's a certified member of the legendary Death Match Society, a club that has special permission to temporarily bypass and deactivate the neck chip's strict safety protocols. Completely shocked by this loophole, Ash wonders if the warden actually lets convicts fight to the literal death. Lang explains that, yeah, someone might straight up catch a body, but that doesn't actually make the winner a murderer in the eyes of the law. Right beside the combat arena is a high-tech medical bay, where specialized doctors can revive anyone from the brink, as long as they get them on the table within a 5-minute window. And honestly, even if someone actually ends up permanently dead, the prison administration doesn't give a single care. Right in the middle of his breakdown, Lang suddenly squint eyes and recognizes our main character as the infamous leader of that crazy Four Pillars cult. He immediately gets sidetracked all over again, gushingly sharing that he's actually low-key interested in joining the cult himself. Snapping back to reality, he says, it makes total sense why the rookie is so eager to jump into the gladiator arena, especially with the 15th of the month right around the corner. Seeing that the new guy looks completely clueless and lost, the veteran convict drops a banger explanation on why that date is so terrifying. Literally everyone locked up in this facility is on death row, and the only reason they get treated to a luxury life inside is because the final stop waiting for them at the end of the line is absolute, undeniable execution. Ash low-key expected as much, but having it confirmed aloud makes his entire body freeze in pure terror. The horrific Moon Judgment is a massive televised event happening on the 1st and 15th, raking in absolute millions in broadcast revenue for the kingdom. To put it plainly, no cap. Watching people get executed is peak entertainment in this twisted world. He instantly drops to his knees, completely folded by despair, but his face suddenly brightens up the exact second he learns there is actually a loophole to dodge the execution block. Every convict starts off with a base score of 50 points, which automatically decays by 10 points at the end of every month. Hitting rock bottom at 0 won't trigger an immediate punishment, but the lower your overall point pool drops, the higher your chances are of getting dragged into that televised Moon Judgment. It's basically the ultimate metric that decides who gets executed. Luckily, there are plenty of grinding methods to farm points back up, and the easiest route is by generating pure economic value. Depending on their unique stats and professional backgrounds, they can contract out specific services to benefit the prison economy. That being said, the vast majority of inmates are just brute force killers, with absolutely zero marketable skills or talents to exploit. Because of that, the death matches run on a high-stakes point wagering system, where the winner completely takes all. Plus, before they step onto the main stage, most of them are forced to put on vanity makeup for the live stream cameras. As he explains the rules, Lang literally licks the leftovers off his milk glass and double-checks to see if the rookie is still down to join their fight club. After hearing all this intense info, with the contract locked in, he guides Ash down to the underground arena to check out the facility. The opening match of the bracket requires a minimum buy-in of just 1 point, but that requirement ramps up exponentially with every subsequent round. It starts off as a slow crawl for casuals, but the financial stakes skyrocket because of that compounding structure. The pros usually use these low-tier early fights just to scout out the competition and dissect their opponent's fatal weaknesses. And with the monthly judgment date rapidly approaching, this underground coliseum was guaranteed to be absolutely packed with sweatlords. While they're walking through a dimly lit corridor, he casually asks Ash if he's trying to buy some freshly harvested meat. Apparently, edible monster meat frequently drops right out of the arena, acting as a premium commodity to blow their hard-earned contribution points on. Flashing a completely devious grin, they step inside the main hall, where the crowd instantly hypes Lang up, calling him the gourmet. Noticing the new kid trailing right behind him, the local thugs start trolling, asking if this is his brand new boyfriend. But that casual jab at his romantic life instantly pisses off the giant, who threatens to violently fold them on the spot. The threat works flawlessly, forcing the trolls to immediately back down, allowing Ash to finally get a proper, formal introduction to the crew. Ash realizes he randomly picked a complete monster to mess with earlier, noticing that Lang is clearly a high-tier, notorious boss in this underground scene. Right at that moment, an intense match between Tiger and Rudder is going down. Dead center in the blood-stained arena, an unassuming old man was effortlessly tanking the heavy combos of a massive orc. The orc clearly hadn't jumped into the queue for a hot minute, and made a fatal mistake by matching up against the old man. Especially since Tiger wagered an insane amount of points on this match. There was absolutely zero choice but to bring this match to a brutal close. Inevitably, Rudder's exhausted, sluggish body gets mercilessly juggled around, with one heavy blow straight up knocking out his giant orc tusk. The human claimer throws his hands up in victory, before unleashing a final, devastating barrage of strikes right to his opponent's face. Even though the clear winner of this battle was already decided, the match itself still wouldn't hit the finish line just yet. The magical air barrier keeping them locked in hasn't been deactivated, meaning this brawl goes on. It only finishes when someone catches a body, or gets put into a literal coma. In a cutthroat gladiator pit where you can't even tap out, you are forced to constantly apply max pressure and completely demolish whoever is standing across from you. Countless cocky fools have completely overestimated their own builds and gotten folded by a veteran fighter who is absolutely starving for points. At the end of the day, the entire purpose of a deathmatch is to siphon points away from losers and give them to a more deserving, high-tier player. Speaking of the wager system, Ash suddenly spots that the point buy-ins for the two combatants don't actually match up. Turns out, this is standard procedure, since the rules dictate that prisoners are forced to bet a slightly higher amount than whatever they risked in their previous lobby. Tiger has already queued up and fought 34 times before this, which is exactly why he had to wager 35 points for this round. On the flip side, Rudder has only entered the arena 10 times, but he is so down bad he only has 5 total points left to his name. Unfortunately for him, the guy constantly matches up against high-level bosses he has zero chance of beating. Right as they're breaking down the math, the magic shield finally deactivates, and the orc's limp body face-plants into the dirt. With the fight officially wrapped up, the emergency medical team bursts through the doors on standby and rushes the unconscious body straight to the medical bay to clutch up a revive. Tiger nonchalantly struts back to the sidelines, faking exhaustion even though he clearly just hustled and baited his opponent. Even the Phantom Sword Maiden is forced to respect the old man's cracked stats, low-key wondering how a senior citizen is moving like a peak athlete. The surrounding inmates explain that, while raw mana usage is completely locked down and nerfed in the pit, pure physical brawling is 100% legal. The majority of traditional sorcerers in this fantasy world are basically basic, fragile humans, the exact second their magic source gets shut off. However, there's a select breed of martial artists known as body sorcerers, who spend their entire lives conditioning their physical forms and fine-tuning their style, taking things to an even more broken level. There's a subset that permanently modifies their biology, reaching a point where their passive physical buffs literally never decay. Tiger is an example of this type, and he's called a masochist sorcerer. Ash is told to get in the arena already, since he's already there anyway. The Sword Maiden tells him to pick someone who fights with fists and advises him to do the same. After all, he's probably too weak to hold a weapon long enough. He obediently turns and asks someone if he can find a bare-handed opponent. The mysterious figure is delighted, as he's just the type of person he's searching for. Ash honestly admits that he's only betting 1 point, so he won't get much out of preying on him. Fortunately, the prisoner doesn't mind, and says he'll even give him some points of his own. Just then, Igor steps into the light, claiming to have fists as weak as his, getting ready for his match. The audience words makes Ash realize that it won't be an easy fight. Igor insists that it should be a fair fight, especially since he's the leader of the Four Pillars cult. Based on the cheers, it seems like this opponent isn't the type to fight. Straightforwardly, he gets hopeful, remembering Sword Maiden's advice about not agreeing to anything he offers. However, the Sword Maiden insultingly laughs at his empty ambition. He goes on about not accepting anything, but there he was willingly stepping into the ring, following Igor's challenge. Realizing that he foolishly agreed to a match, he trembles as he walks forward. He doesn't know why, but he was immediately convinced that fighting was the only option. Falling into the succubus trap, the thought of saying, No didn't even exist in his head. The exact moment he was beguiled enters his head. Sword Maiden repeats that. He shouldn't carelessly respond to anyone's invitation. He's the final observer, and, as such, he should reject everything that comes his way. With a flat no to him. The only way up is to seize his destiny. With his own power like a demon lord. Ash turns away, ironically rejecting her as she advised, just like that. The arena barrier boots up, and the battle officially kicks off. The neck chip's limiter completely turns off, and it feels like a heavy shackle has finally been unshackled. Igor doesn't waste a single millisecond and blurs forward, keeping his fists locked and loaded. Our boy instinctively throws up a high guard block, but the veteran completely predicted this bait, and hits him with a ruthless leg sweep, face planting hard onto the dirt. Ash rolls away, desperately trying to reset his stance, only to find his opponent already breathing down his neck. A devastating liver shot punch drives straight into his defenseless gut, and the raw impact has him coughing up fluids all over the ring. However, Igor was absolutely nowhere near finished, flashing a sadistic grin as he tells his victim to bite down on his tongue. The rookie does exactly as he's told, already tearing up from the agonizing amount of pain. Another heavy hook flies in, this time rattling the side of his dome. The poor young man stumbles around like a zombie, completely losing his footing, and barely keeping his mind from fading to black. The second his back gets pinned against a magical barrier, Igor exploits the opening to unleash a non-stop barrage of heavy strikes. Still desperately shielding himself with his forearms up, Ash starts panicking inside his head, wondering when the heck this promised EXP transfer is actually going to trigger. As the damage keeps stacking, he screams out for the Sword Maiden, basically begging her to tag in and save his life. But she just casually looks on and tells him to stop crying and start swinging back, noting that the experience points will actually siphon into his build way faster. The more he acts like a meat shield and takes a beating. The Sword Maiden acts completely unbothered on the outside, but she's low-key studying him with incredibly sharp, observant eyes. No cap, he looks absolutely pathetic right now, but he's still testing his limits, and flat out refusing to throw in the towel. In fact, she can't help but respect the fact that, even without relying on a broken sorcery cheat code manual, the dude has some serious, unyielding mental fortitude at his core. As she predicted from the start, he truly is the definitive final observer, fueled by the sheer stubborn survival instinct of a burnt-out corporate slave. Ash locks his eyes on the prize and looks for a precise counterattack. He grits his teeth and drives his fist straight down the pipe, but the slow, unpolished strike is easily sidestepped by his opponent. Finding his struggle completely adorable, Igor effortlessly taps his face with a quick jab. This painful loop continues for a couple more exchanges, and the spectator crowd goes wild, seeing his signature combos connect, where the victim literally ends up falling straight into his oncoming fists. Even high-tier vets like Tiger and Lang are forced to respect his technical prowess. But Loki dodged the question of who would actually win in a real fight. At this stage of the match, Ash was looking like a completely bruised-up punching bag. Igor mockingly asks if he knows how he manages to secure dub after dub, despite having a completely weak physical build. No cap, it's totally true that nothing about his individual base stats was particularly special. They're honestly both weaklings on paper, but the difference is that naive casuals like our young main character are just mindless livestock, while Igor is the apex predator who skins and butchers them for sport. Literal monster races with vastly superior builds have all gotten folded before him, completely losing the mental battle the exact millisecond they stepped into the ring. Watching Ash crash out with another desperate, sloppy attempt to secure a hit. He already predicts exactly what this low-level boy is going to do next. He casually reads his strategy like an open book and lands a perfect counterattack. Every single thought the kid has is basically streaming straight into his head, making his next moves plain as day to his eyes, like a helpless lamb lined up for a backyard roast. The only thing left on the menu was to completely devour his pathetic opponent. Flashing a confident smirk, Igor easily evades yet another swing, and drops a heavy 12-6 elbow to put him to sleep for good. But to his absolute shock, Ash pulls off a perfect matrix dodge and immediately fires back with a counterstrike. The veteran instantly leaped back to create distance, sensing a sudden spike of danger that was completely unexpected from Scrub. This was undeniably a massive red flag for him. Trolling his food was no longer an option, meaning he needs to clutch up and secure the knockout right this second. Meanwhile, the spectator crowd was getting absolutely wild and hyped up, even screaming at the blonde vet to bring actual blades. to slice and dice his enemies in the next lobby. That being said, Lang points out that securing the dub won't be nearly as effortless as they think. Glancing right back toward the center of the ring, the crowd notices that Igor, who was landing every single punch effortlessly earlier, was now swinging at air and missing more and more hits. The battle was finally turning into a peak banger, and some specs start speculating that Ash was just baiting and faking being weak all along. Tiger instantly shuts down that theory, confirming that the kid was legitimately a fragile scrub just a few moments ago. His physical form hasn't been conditioned by actual war, and Lang knows this better than anyone as the guy who escorted him here. Yet in a matter of a few insane minutes, he has somehow developed god-tier, sharp combat instincts on the fly. The absolute wrong person stuck in the worst possible environment, suddenly awakening a completely terrifying talent. It was a tragic waste of potential, to say the least. For the absolute first time since the opening bell, the cult leader was aggressively forcing the beautiful beast onto the defense. The Sword Maiden smirks, fully aware that the match was already over. Every historical era has its own defining meta, and right now, people aren't looking to conquer new territories anymore. Instead, the meta of this current age revolves around high IQ, sophisticated domination. In a society where your social class is locked in at birth, psyche sorcerers are basically the apex predators of the world. Even the most powerful ruling clans fear their broken abilities, which is exactly why knowledge about their specific power system is kept hidden from the lower-class peasants. However, Igor managed to hit the absolute jackpot of luck conditions, and Loki taught himself how to become a full-fledged psyche sorcerer. On top of that, he already possessed a base magical contract spirit, which effectively turned a spoken word into absolute law, as long as his specific trigger conditions are met. His unique skill set is completely unstoppable. He will literally act as a king wherever a strict set of rules exists, and this high-security prison is no exception to that rule. By abusing this OP power, he's completely dominated everyone around him, and even after his victims catch a massive L to him in a death match, they will brainlessly queue up for another battle, until their point balance is entirely drain dry. But now, the rookie standing across from him has completely transformed. He went from acting like a silent, submissive animal, just waiting around to be slaughtered, to becoming a much louder animal, who is still fundamentally waiting to get slaughtered. Flashing a confident grin, Igor admits that he low-key slept on him at first. His insane learning curve gives him the potential to be a high-tier threat later, but his actual, raw physical power output is absolute garbage. Once this specific lobby closes out, he has zero intentions of ever accepting a rematch with him, and Nash won't be able to force a challenge either. Understanding the system layout and exploiting those rules to oppress people is what real power looks like. That is the ultimate difference between the apex dominator and the submissive loser, completely zoning out and ignoring his speech. Ash just casually tells him to stop covering his own face. Igor is caught entirely off guard by this bizarre, unhinged comment, as the rookie blankly delivers the ultimate line, telling him that his face is an absolute banger to look at. For a long, drawn-out moment, this single compliment rent-free consumes his entire psyche. And since this was literally the first time in his entire life that he's ever received such genuine, heartfelt praise, his guard completely crumbled as he unconsciously dropped his hands. Boom! A rock-solid, peak punch connects right on the button of his chin. He completely folds, dropping flat onto the floor like a sack of bricks. And just like that, no cap, the entire match was officially wrapped up. Ash clutched up the victory and is declared the undisputed winner. But the absolute second that intense adrenaline dump leaves his system, pure exhaustion takes the wheel, and he faceplants right onto the floor too. His very first taste of actual prison brawling was painful and completely unbearable, and the true, twisted purpose of the deathmatch society finally clicks for him. The whole system is designed to turn these convicts into soulless, glorified cash cows and sources of live entertainment for elite wealthy citizens. Every single person locked in here is totally trapped and destined to catch an L, doomed to get deleted either by the Moon Judgment or a high-stakes deathmatch. Suddenly, his inner rational corporate mindset pops up rent-free, admitting that this harsh punishment low-key makes sense for people who actually broke the law. Honestly, if he wasn't trapped in this nightmare himself as a victim, he'd probably be actively cheering and clapping for the exact same broken meat grinder system he's currently stuck in. While having this internal monologue, he suddenly notices that all the agonizing pain in his body has completely vanished. Right on cue, a muffled voice tells him he better hurry up and go chase down some dinner if he's finally awake and fully patched up. Ash snaps his eyes open, but they instantly bulge out in absolute horror. The second he realizes the person standing over his bed is rocking the full, creepy aesthetic outfit of a medieval plague doctor. The doctor gets low-key anxious because of his extreme freak-out, but confidently reassures him that the medical staff treated his injuries flawlessly. After double-checking to confirm that this weirdo is legitimately just a healer, our boy tries to troll, asking if they can throw in some free plastic surgery to make him look handsome. It was honestly just meant to be some casual, lighthearted banter, but to his absolute bewilderment, the doctor gets super hyped and starts listing off a bunch of wild medical options to fulfill his request. Completely terrified by this overly enthusiastic reaction, Ash quickly tries to back out of the deal, claiming he doesn't have a single cent to his name. But the medic completely freezes him by saying that they only want him, not his cash. A terribly awkward, painful silence fills the room after that bizarre confession. Trying to play along with the creepy vibe, Ash nervously laughs that they haven't even gone on a first date yet. The masked doctor quickly clarifies the misunderstanding, though, explaining that they literally just want his physical body to perform experimental surgery on. In fact, they're so down bad for a test subject, they'll even pay him out of pocket for the rights to slice him up. They try to sell him on the sketchy deal, listing off how incredibly lucky he is to have a world-class surgeon with elite, god-tier credentials, willing to work on his build for absolute free. That being said, our main character is well aware from his past life that things marketed as free always come with a massive, hidden price tag. Pressing for the catch, he finally forces the doctor to admit that their experimental operations do carry a very minor, tiny element of risk. It might sound completely harmless to some naive, low-IQ casual, but Ash knows exactly how dangerous that corporate speak wording is. No cap, he demands the healer stop dodging and give him the exact specific details on those risks. The doctor explains that local medicine in this world is heavily developed using magical spirits, and those entities can pull off literal miracles as long as the target's body has some moisture left. The most standard meta setup used for medical recovery is hydrotherapy, but no cap, it has a whole bag of massive flaws. We're talking major system errors and completely botched organ regrowth. Even so, a medical spirit can actually level up and evolve with enough grinding, becoming way more efficient and less buggy over time. This high-security prison is basically the ultimate peak location to farm Dr. EXP, since there are hardened convicts floating on the brink of death every single day. Once again, it turns out the inmates are just being exploited as raw resources. Only this time, they're being used as guinea pigs to train rookie healers. That being said, the actual medical treatment doesn't cost a single contribution point from the patient, so the facility administration isn't being completely toxic and exploitative to the max. Ash then, straight up chews out the medic for rocking such a terrifying, ominous aesthetic. But the doctor explains it actually acts as a vital safety precaution to deter traumatized, waking patients from aggressively throwing hands with the staff whenever surgery completely glitches out. While the mask is low-key meant to improve patient-doctor dynamics, this entire defensive setup basically confirms there's an incredibly high chance of operations going horribly south. Getting completely frustrated, the young man fires back at the surgeon, spitting some incredibly harsh but accurate accusations. The medic gets visibly hurt by his aggressive verbal reality check, but meekly tries to explain that the botched results weren't entirely their fault. Literal tears start streaming down the mask as they desperately try to explain their side of the story. Ash sighs and asks if they are even aware of their own biggest mechanical flaw. He points out that their entire speech pattern lacks authority. It's completely weak, timid, and lacks any real confidence. And because they sound so down bad and insecure, literally any minor side effect the patient feels will instantly be blamed entirely on the staff. He passionately drops some corporate-tier knowledge, telling the doctor that they need to start spouting their medical diagnoses with absolute confidence, even in scenarios where they completely fail to save the person on the table. He explains that gaslighting them is only the very first step of the strategy, and they still need to aggressively call out toxic patients for failing to properly take care of their own health in the first place. Since absolutely nobody has a perfect, flawless lifestyle, they are guaranteed to find some sketchy angle or bad habit to successfully blame the patient for. As long as these two steps are executed perfectly, unshakable authority can be established, and they can trick the inmates into viewing their garbage treatment as an elite privilege. This entire toxic corporate philosophy is a banger strategy, spawned from his years of grinding as a corporate slave in his past life. Moving forward, there's only one absolute rule to follow. No matter how badly a surgery gets folded or messed up, the doctor must firmly insist and stand on the fact that they already clutched up and did their absolute best. Fully inspired and hyped up, the medic starts screaming and chanting this gaslighting mantra over and over. Ash smirks, completely satisfied with his new creation, and completely certain they'll easily pick up the rest of the gaslighting playbook on their own. It's honestly a pretty toxic, terrible practice in actual corporate offices. But hey, it's probably going to massively boost his healer's career in this place. Right as he prepares to exit, the doctor calls out to him, asking one last time if he's absolutely sure he doesn't want that plastic surgery, even boldly adding that walking around with a face as mid as his is practically a crime no cap. Ash is honestly torn between feeling proud or offended, seeing how his brand new student was already weaponizing his lessons against him. He just shrugs it off with a smirk, firing back that his natural face is still probably a million times better than whatever the masked weirdo is hiding. Totally triggered, they argue back and passionately scream that they aren't ugly at all, instantly making our boys super curious about what's underneath that hood. For a hot second, it legit feels like they're about to unmask and do a face reveal right then and there. But instead, they suddenly slap a metal medical tag into Ash's hand, labeled with no. 222. He's strictly ordered to keep that badge on his person 24/7. So the entire prison yard knows exactly who his personal doctor is. Once again, this sketchy interaction makes the young man question the doctor's actual identity. But they completely dodge the question like a pro, and simply repeat the exact same instruction, telling him to carry that tag wherever he goes. With that, the recovering patient gets aggressively shoved out the door and told to go sprint for dinner before the main mess hall shuts down. Right before completely stepping out of the clinic, Ash looks back and casually asks the healer to peel and slice an apple for him. The next time he ends up landing in a hospital bed. Just like that, they smoothly lock in an agreement to grab a bite to eat together soon. Honestly, this is actually a classic psychological hack, meant to build instant rapport and get close to people by manipulating them into doing small, completely trivial favors for you. He used to abuse this exact strategy to secure massive corporate bonuses and promotions back in his past life as a professional grind-set slave. Suddenly, a senior doctor steps out from behind the privacy curtains and demands to know why 222 is still wasting time standing around in the ward. As the veteran supervisor quickly pieces together what just went down, he aggressively questions if the subordinate was casually chatting and fraternizing with the inmate. He warns them that it's strictly against the rules, especially since the watchdogs over at the Human Rights Association can absolutely never find out about the illegal experiments they run here. Hearing this, 222 immediately panics and runs off, brutally reminded that they wouldn't even have a job in this facility if their supervisor hadn't personally pulled major strings for them. It's clear the senior doctor was just flexing his corporate power dynamics and putting the rookie right back in their place. No cap, it's totally true that they only secured this gig through corrupt nepotism connections, and that fatal flaw can always be thrown back in their face as criticism. As they take the heat, their mind suddenly flashes back to Ash, noticing that his passive recovery rate is way higher than any of the other test subjects. Giddy with excitement at the thought of a new research project, they low-key start praying for him to get aggressively beaten up again real soon. Meanwhile, after surviving so much insanity, Ash honestly hoped he'd finally be moving into a safer, more chill meta, but it looks like his basic daily routine hasn't changed a single bit. He just finessed a total of 45 points from that arena match, but he's still strictly scheduled to undergo the lethal moon judgment in just a few days. Regardless of how high their current point balance is, absolutely every single convict is forced to attend their very first judgment broadcast. Honestly, the standard survival rate for regular casuals isn't even that terrible, but since he's flagged as the infamous leader of the Four Pillars cult, he is 100% bound to be the main lobby target during the live event. Since our young main character has zero intentions of throwing his life away, without a fight, Lang drops a banger update, revealing someone else is down to fight him, asking if he's ready to lock in and accept the challenge. Turns out this is the actual, real reason the massive unit was camping out and waiting for our boy in the mess hall. The new challenger is apparently wagering an insane 36 points, and it's incredibly rare for high-tier players like that to queue up against low-level newbies. The dude goes by the name Varkas. But Ash has literally never even heard of this man in his entire life. Just then, Lang mutters a completely different, mysterious name under his breath. Hearing it, Ash remains dead silent and just tilts his head in pure confusion. While the seasoned veteran closely studies his facial reaction, Lang quickly brushes the awkward moment off, claiming he just randomly thought of an old acquaintance he used to know. Shifting gears back to the upcoming match, they discuss his new rival's weapon build, which is apparently a basic, standard sword. The mere mention of a blade instantly makes our boy glance over at the spectral sword maiden, though his eyes definitely wander to some totally inappropriate places. She immediately notices him disrespectfully peeking at her build, and sharply orders him to speak his hidden thoughts out loud if he's got something to say. Ash honestly wonders if he can physically interact with her forms, the exact same way she can aggressively touch and punch him, having absolutely zero patience to play along with his down-bad flirting games. She uses her telepathic aura to completely hijack his speech. Suddenly, he blurs out to Lang to tell Varkas to wash his neck properly and wait for him to absolutely fold him in the ring tomorrow. With the match officially booked, the two convicts part ways, with Lang supposedly heading off to hang out with his boyfriend. Except the whole vibe is low-key odd, since he's actually walking straight back toward the bloody deathmatch arena, rather than some private couple's quarters, shaking his attention off the weird behavior. The sword maiden points ahead, ordering him to march straight back to his cell. After all, they are about to spend the night exploring a peak fantasy lore world he's never known. Even though he's low-key offended by the spicy context she's implying, he blushes furiously and happily rushes right after her. Meanwhile, back inside the pitch-black deathmatch arena, a truly horrific, stomach-churning scene is playing out. Lang reports back that Ash officially locked in and accepted the duel, clarifying it wasn't because he recognized the guy's clout, but simply because he's down for an epic sword fight. Varkas promises he'll clutch up and return the favor sometime soon, but the bald, tatted prisoner grins and says he can pay his debts right now by explaining his sudden obsession with this rookie cultist and spilling the tea on who exactly Silent is. The man doesn't mind sharing, but warns Lang he better be mentally prepared for the weight of that knowledge. Lang just continues to savagely tear through the flesh of a dead arena fighter, muttering that he'd honestly rather stay far away from high-profile big shots. Munching on the raw meat, he adds that no cap, Ash looks way more like a naive, innocent kid than some infamous big-brain cult leader. Varkas coldly fires back, stating that anyone who gets thrown into this literal hellhole is completely far removed from ever being called innocent. Walking down the dark, eerie corridor, Varkas reconfirms that Ash has already signed his own death warrant by accepting the match. A corrupt guard reminds him to completely destroy the rookie, demolishing his body so badly that even a high-tier, two-winged healer can't clutch up a revive. As long as the kid catches a body and stays dead tomorrow, the elite elf prisoner will finally earn his ticket out and be set free from this prison's clutches. However, he and a young child he's desperately protecting won't be allowed to stay in the capital city. According to Silent's strict orders, that's the deal, but Varkas snaps, saying he has absolutely zero interest in breathing the same air as that corrupt tyrant anyway. He suddenly gets violently shoved forward, as the guard reminds him of his place, treating him like basic criminal trash. The high-tier elf death row inmate gets strictly chewed out for clinging to his pride and acting like he's still a noble. Meanwhile, Ash is completely, blissfully unaware of this dark conspiracy going down, busily plotting out his next build updates with the Sword Maiden. She tells him she has a couple of life updates for him, with the good news being he just secured government-provided, lifetime, free housing. The bad news, though, his head could literally get sliced off at any given moment. Even a cracked, max-level powerhouse like Tiger is completely powerless in here, solely because of that broken compliance chip embedded in his neck. Even if a player somehow finesses a prison break, the chip will immediately track them down and can force their body to execute any command the system desires. And unfortunately, there's absolutely zero chance he can just slice it out, as the cybernetic tech has already completely fused with his literal bone marrow. Keeping that depressing fact in mind, he desperately asks if there's any hidden loophole to override it. Using basic sorcery, flashing a totally eerie, sinister smirk, she notes that there are actually a ton of different methods. The most viable strategy he can realistically unlock right now is a high-tier, broken sword magic miracle. It's essentially a top-tier defensive skill built to cleanse heavy debuffs, meaning it can completely delete that tracker chip from his system instantly. However, to manifest these miracles, he first needs to harvest some magic spirits, and there are technically 4 distinct grinding paths to acquire them. The first path is to naturally resonate with the frequencies of the arcane realm, but the neck chip is hard-coded to completely nerf and block that option. The second route is to negotiate and trade with other high-level players, but he's currently so down bad he has absolutely zero collateral to offer. Option 3 is straight up deleting another user and stealing their spirit by force, which is obviously way out of his league at his current level. That leaves the fourth and final viable option on the board. He has to go out into the wild and hunt down an embonded spirit himself. But here's the catch. To log into the arcane realm, a user must first trigger and sync up with an active magic spirit to let their consciousness smoothly slide into that alternate dimension. To put it plainly, he needs a spirit to enter the lobby, but he's trying to enter the lobby precisely because he doesn't have a spirit. It's the exact same nightmare a fresh college graduate faces when they realize that every basic entry-level job listing demands 3 years of work experience. Just as he's about to completely crash out and spiral, the Sword Maiden drops a major bombshell, telling him he doesn't actually need to use a personal spirit to exploit this specific loophole. He instantly looks up, his eyes suddenly filling with hope, as she casually reminds him that she already possesses the legendary sword spirit, giving her full access to the server. And since their souls are fundamentally linked through that sorcery manual, she can easily party up and carry him into the zone without any system errors. A bit skeptical, he quickly opens up his interface menu to check the manual, to see if this broken co-op feature actually exists. To his absolute shock, no cap, there is literally a hidden, unlocked expansion module right there. He rapidly ticks all the necessary confirmation boxes, locking in his status to signal that he's ready to dive in. A long, awkward silence follows where absolutely nothing happens, and he glances over to see the Sword Maiden just casually chilling, forcing a desperate smile onto his face. He begs her to hurry the heck up and accept his invite already, prompting her to tell him she needs to go get everything properly prepped first. As the loading screen waits stretch out even longer, the Sword Maiden straight up roasts his impatience, scoffing that a total scrub like him couldn't possibly comprehend the prep work required for a peak jump. And with that, she completely vanishes, leaving him all by himself in the quiet cell. Ash instantly collapses face first onto his mattress, completely drained of all his energy, after surviving the most chaotic, exhausting day of his entire life. Meanwhile, over in the glittering city of Stellaris, which runs a solid 3 hours ahead of the prison's time zone, inside the elite academy's female dorms, Sonia's physical body was just winding down after a brutal grind session. Alongside Ingrid, her schedule was completely packed with top-tier advanced lectures, intense sparring brackets, and midnight sword magic practice, in order to fully master the legendary wave sword style. She's currently getting private coaching from the GOAT, Professor Teo, a literal sword saint who is on the verge of unlocking 4 wings. She casually offers to put in a good word for Ingrid too, but her friend wants to clutch up and earn her own clout manually. That being said, Sonia admits she would have blindly walked into Felix's trap and accepted his challenge if her roommate hadn't looked out for her. Plus, the professor just secured her a roster spot in the prestigious Truth University Championship Tournament, granting her VIP access to all their peak training facilities. This massive news instantly grabs Adele's full attention, and she immediately starts begging to get introduced to the hottest guys on campus. Glancing over at Lois, who had been sitting there completely stiff and silent, Sonia smugly brags that she would never leave her roommates hanging. The toxic, petty flexing makes the quiet girl visibly shake with rage, as she white-knuckles the textbook in her hands. It was plain as day that she was hitting her absolute boiling point, and was about to completely blow up on her. But to everyone's absolute surprise, she takes a deep breath, controls her temper, and resets her composure. Loki disappointed that she didn't get a wild reaction out of her. The Sword Maiden leaves the dorm room to head down to the meditation hall, left behind in the lounge. Adele turns her eyes to Lois with a genuinely concerned look. She tries to comfort her friend, telling her there's absolutely no reason to let an arrogant country bumpkin rent-free in her head. However, the girl is way too smart to deny that she just caught a massive L. Right now, Sonia has scaled the ranks so fast that she's looking up at her from a completely lower tier. But she refuses to let this toxic dynamic continue and bow down to her. Once they finally graduate, not really knowing how to fix the heavy tension for the time being, Adele slowly backs off with a worried look on her face. deciding it's probably best to just give her friend some space to breathe. Meanwhile, Sonya finally pulls up to the Grand Meditation Hall, a specialized server room built exclusively for elite students looking to log into the arcane realm. With her student ID and security access flawlessly cleared, she gets instructed to straight up walk directly into the solid wall. She does exactly as told and clips right through it without a single problem. Deep inside the facility, a broken miracle passive accelerates the thoughts of absolutely everyone inside. Turns out, the observer has actually been spectating her this entire time. Since he's still stuck dealing with her this late at night, he jokingly tries to bill her for some heavy overtime pay. But since she's completely broke, he forces her to pay him back by officially turning the girl into his employee. She hasn't even graduated from the Magic Academy yet, meaning as a low-tier intern, she's getting absolute zero pay. That being said, he's obviously put an insane amount of effort into leveling up her stats, with the sole intention of reaping way bigger rewards later. Suddenly dropping the banter and locking in, he tells her that all she needs to do is stay alive. He instantly laughs it off like it's just a joke, but low-key admits that at his current level, he's too weak to queue into the arcane realm by himself. Because of that, he absolutely needs her to party up and carry him forward. Sonya unlocks and passes through a massive secure door, finding herself standing in a completely serene, open field, right under a beautiful, starry night sky. Taking a seat directly on the grass, she summons her sword spirit and gently closes her eyes. This soul bond allows the server gates to finally open, and her consciousness immediately drops straight into the arcane realm. She panics and calls out for the observer, worried she got disconnected, but he reassures her that he's right there holding down the fort. After all, they got a peak sacred destiny linking their accounts together, spawning directly onto a small boat. She is totally shocked to see the observer's physical character model. But no cap, he's just as surprised to see what she looks like too. The two users enter the spirit realm for the absolute first time, floating aimlessly on top of the vast sea of knowledge, while Ash was totally hyped and delighted, because he was rocking the exact drip his main character wears. Sonya was busy dropping lore on how the initial spawn point for every player in the arcane realm is always this exact body of water. That being said, she has absolutely zero clue why a boat spawned with them, since the Academy textbooks strictly state that players always arrive completely bare. By that, the lesson meant there should be absolutely no external vehicles or starter items allowed. She even mentions hearing that regular casuals just get soaked in the water and have no choice but to manually swim for their lives. Ash then confidently drops a big brain theory that her soul was split into two separate entities, one half forming the boat and the other her human avatar. When she questions how on earth he can actually prove that, he casually tells her to take a lap and swim away from the vessel, predicting she won't be able to make it far since her soul is literally anchored to it. She executes his little experiment, but paddles right back a few moments later, completely obliterating his big brain theory. Our boy catching a fat L makes her flash a smug smirk, but his actual, hidden agenda becomes crystal clear the second she spots him staring dead at her soaked, form-fitting avatar, even though he frantically caps that it was just a scientific test. The cheap trick instantly earns him a swift, heavy punch right to the dome. He tries to downplay the presence of their starter boat as no big deal, but Sonya fires back that this vehicle is a massive, game-changing cheat code, since drowning is literally the #1 reason sorcerers lose their lives. When it comes to min-maxing a sorcerer's build, the arcane realm is undisputed as the absolute most critical grinding zone, and top-tier players spend their whole lives trying to map it out. However, this high-stakes endeavor causes countless greedy souls to get completely devoured by the relentless sea. Catching a body here means you're stuck waiting out a 3-day mental respawn timer, as your real-world soul takes a massive amount of psychological trauma. Worse yet, the higher your level is, the harder your stats get completely nerfed. While low-level rookies only need a brief 3 days to reset, silver ranks need at least 15, and gold tiers are benched for months. Meanwhile, Sanctuary and Legendary class sorcerers take literal years to patch up, and if a user is completely locked out of exploring this server, their overall progression speed drops by a painful 90%. Because of those high stakes, players take vastly different approaches. Some go super conservative, slowly farming safe zones to level up steadily. But on the complete flip side, you have the absolute sweatlords who risk everything to reach peak top-tier status. Of course, catching a single L can permanently brick your entire account. With that insane context established, It becomes blindingly obvious that spawning with a whole boat is straight-up cheating. Suddenly getting a wild idea. Ash wonders if this hidden buff is tied to his broken sorcerer's manual. Literally all of his other interface systems are completely grayed out, but it looks like he uniquely holds the admin keys to steer this ship. A convenient system pop-up window even appears to gracefully walk him through a beginner tutorial lobby. However, his reading time gets abruptly cut short as the entire hull violently shakes. Spotted Sonya manually paddling the water with her bare arms like a madman. He tells her to chill out and let a pro take the wheel. She looks back at him, utterly stunned, never expecting a total newcomer to actually possess the navigation codes to safely traverse this dangerous realm. But the exact moment the observer asks her for a quick minute to read the basic tutorial, she just lets out a heavy, disappointed sigh, realizing his big talk was likely just a massive troll after all. Even a literal sword saint like Teo didn't have an exploration guide for this place. Deep within the mysterious arcane, every single player is equally blind, desperately searching for forbidden knowledge. But the number one rule you always have to keep in mind is that you can never, under any circumstances, camp out in one spot for too long. If a user just idles around out here, their physical body in the real world will literally think they flatlined, which straight up causes their heart to stop beating. He's honestly shocked to see her acting so low-key terrified of catching an L, since he fully expected her to be a reckless sweat lord chasing cheap thrills. No cap, Sonya actually used to have that exact same crash-out mindset, but that was way back when she still had absolutely nothing left to lose. Now, she's an elite prodigy, who is practically guaranteed to secure gold-tier status within the next 20 years, and potentially hit sanctuary level in 40. Reaching gold would basically transform her into high-tier nobility, while hitting sanctuary means she can effortlessly shake up the entire global meta. Wanting to play it completely safe and avoid any risk, she manually paddles the ship toward a shallow white mist, which is widely known to grant lucky drops. Right on cue, the boat suddenly accelerates at max speed, pulling a clean, aggressive U-turn, as it completely responds to Ash's mental inputs. With a totally blank, unbothered expression, he drops the bombshell that he's the one who brought this vehicle into the server, and he literally just figured out how to drive the thing, before she can even open her mouth to argue with his terrible driving. The sparkling fog comes into contact with her character avatar. Her eyes light up as a flood of legendary sword techniques streams into her mind. It was pure, unadulterated sword magic lore, downloading straight into her build as they blast forward through the zone. As long as a player keeps moving across this server, sorcerers will automatically siphon and absorb free hidden knowledge. On top of that, it can even condense directly into silver magical power, officially unlocking the base symbol of a one-winged sorcerer's stats. A literal glowing feather spawns right on her back. And while she is completely soaking up this insane rush of pure knowledge and power, Ash is just staring at his holographic admin map like an absolute clown, reading through the system patch notes on a UI. He spots a real-time tracker screen displaying their exact coordinates, alongside fully detailed descriptions of the surrounding grid sectors. Some regions are flagged as having zero valuable loot, while others flash giant warning signs for high-level danger. Fortunately for them, there's one specific coordinate that explicitly advises players to pull up. He immediately steers the ship directly toward that highlighted waypoint, and the very millisecond they cross into the new zone, Sonya spots a hidden island materializing out of the dense fog up ahead. Her jaw completely drops in absolute disbelief, instantly recognizing this exact terrain as the map where the observer tested. Her build's inside that dream lobby. Misunderstanding the situation, she assumes he must be orchestrating this entire peak pathing strategy on purpose, officially labeling him as some sort of mysterious, god-tier expert. She steps off the boat the exact second they pull up and dock on the shore, and they both notice the thick fog immediately begin to dissipate. Standing right in front of them was a heavily armed man, chanting a strict rule. Beyond 7 paces, the gun is unmatched in speed. Within 7 paces, the gun is both lightning fast and dead accurate. He locks his crosshairs on them the moment they step into his aggro range, completely ignoring Ash's desperate plea to just chill out and talk things through. Boom! The gunpowder ignites, and our boy barely matrix dodges in the nick of time to avoid getting completely erased. The bullet still grazes his leg, but fortunately, the base damage wasn't a total run-ender. Taking a closer look at his character model, he notices his physical form and colors are literally starting to glitch and fade, making him realize that getting hit in this server directly siphons the raw soul energy right out of your real-world body. While he was still trying to process the absolute insanity of this mechanic, Sonya charges ahead as the gunman adjusts his aim, fully prepared to send another lethal round down the pipe. As the mob pulls the trigger with a determined war cry, the sword maiden clutches up, summoning the wave sword magic spirit, and bringing her blade down in a clean vertical arc. The peak slash literally slices the oncoming bullet in half, and completely knocks the enemy off his footing. Before the mob can reset, Ash follows up with a banger assist, tackling the dude and pinning his entire body to lock down his movements. With the target fully CC'd, she is free to blitz forward, and drive her blade straight through the center of his soul's dome. The gunman instantly depawns in a massive puff of smoke, and the duo lets out a heavy sigh of relief. After clutching up a victory in this completely unexpected encounter, they immediately start bickering about the strategy, but pause when they notice a glowing item drop spawning, right where the enemy just got deleted. While Ash is totally clueless, Sonya's eyes widen as she instantly recognizes what this peak loot actually is. This place is a rare legacy island, and that drop item is a literal gun sorcerer manual. Ash is completely shook, no cap, never expecting to stumble into another OP cheat code manual this effortlessly. Suddenly, a lore flashback triggers, showing various small, lightning-fast creatures getting absolutely sniped by a young boy's arrows. Running back to his village with his dad after a successful hunting grind, the kid happily carried all his free loot. But right then, they watch a villager's chest get violently blasted open in real time. In the distance, a terrifying horde of monsters was aggressively pulling up on them. Along with their heavy armor, one massive orc was holding the smoking firearm that had just instantly deleted the innocent villager. The boy and his father immediately drew back their bows and fired a volley to retaliate, but their low-tier arrows just uselessly bounced off the enemy's heavy metal armor build, left completely down bad with absolutely zero way to defend against the raid. The monsters completely wreaked havoc across the settlement, sniping everyone in the city into oblivion and securing a total server takeover. The father somehow manages to carry the boy far away to safety, but the exact millisecond he felt they were finally out of danger, his knees completely buckled and he collapsed to the dirt lifeless. The poor kid is forced to watch his parent draw his final breath, his entire soul suddenly filling with pure rage and hatred. He places his dad's fallen hat on his head, tears streaming down his face, and quietly camps out waiting for a target to step into his crosshairs. An unsuspecting orc gunman comes wandering through the tall grass, but gets instantly deleted as a clean arrow drives straight through his skull. The boy loots the dead monster's firearm right off his body, and officially begins his epic revenge arc. A few clueless wandering mobs are easily taken out at first, but even after the enemy squad starts expecting his guerrilla tactics, the foolish monsters are just no match for a naturally cracked sharpshooter, even if he's rocking a completely unfamiliar weapon build. He picks them off one by one like an absolute pro, smoothly evading all of their counterattacks, and forcing them to step right into the toxic traps he laid out. Initially, he completely wipes out the entire local horde that had originally raided his hometown, but soon he's stacking up a massive body count of countless other monster clans. Years fly by, and the kid grows into a seasoned veteran. Yet his core grind mission remains completely unchanged. At a certain point in his journey, he stumbles across a recruitment flyer looking for orc eradication units, and locks in to join their elite brigade just like that. He spends literal decades just shooting and deleting the exact same monster race that tore his family apart. Eventually awarded a peak Medal of Honor, he finally retires from the grind, sitting back on a rocking chair with his trusty rifle, watching over the peaceful lands he spent his entire life fighting to liberate. Taking a heavy swig of his liquor, he effortlessly snipes a rabid wolf in the distance. Another drink, and no cap, a human raider gets folded this time. Then another, followed by another, completely losing his mind to PTSD. After a while, he walks back inside his house with a smoking barrel, and aims the weapon straight at his own lover. She just stares back at him with deep, incredibly heartbroken eyes. But her expression quickly turns to shock as he suddenly collapses to the floor, finally succumbing to old age and death right then and there. Ash stares at the tragic backstory of the manual's original owner, while Sonya is just completely stunned that he actually speed-read through the entire lore book so fast. On the absolute final page sits a projection of that medal he earned, and from the medal, a glowing blue spirit suddenly materializes. Turns out it's the OP Rapid Fire Spirit, granting the user the broken ability to fire off 2 consecutive shots instantly, complete with an extended attack range buff and pinpoint accuracy. His admin interface screen was breaking down all the data, and a new system notification popped up revealing that cash out recharge option was finally available. The system asks if he wants to trade the item for raw points, and his eyes instantly light up with pure hype as he realizes the insane money-making potential he's holding in his hands. With his highly sought-after magic spirit literally sitting in his inventory, he suddenly snaps back to reality and nervously asks the Sword Maiden if she wants to claim it for her build. She explains it's neither a general class spirit nor a sword spirit, so equipping it would just be a massive waste of her hard-earned cash. He's totally confused, having absolutely zero clue what money has to do with a magic system. She glares at him, wondering if he's low-key trolling her for being poor, because there's no way a regular player wouldn't know this basic day one lore, unless he's some ultra-rich trust fund whale who has never had to stress about the cost of keeping magic spirits fed. Humoring his cluelessness, she breaks down how spirits literally require a constant diet of gold coins, and the maintenance fee depends entirely on the tier and quality of the spirit. If you leave them starving, they will literally deadass starve to death and permanently delete. They can technically consume other raw crafting materials, but that grinding method is a tedious nightmare, making direct currency injections way more convenient for fast leveling. On top of that, just keeping them active constantly drains a sorcerer's mana and mental stamina bars. With that reality check dropped, the pieces finally click in his head, proving that quality is way more important than quantity when assembling a deck. In this meta, spirits are split into distinct classes like gun, sword, masochist, and brawler factions, each locking you into specific build requirements. The ones that don't force you into a strict class restriction are known as general spirits, and basically any casual player can slot them into their setup. A standard sorcerer's loadout is usually an optimized mix of specialized class spirits and flexible general ones. But with all that being said, she has zero interest in an outdated power crept spirit that can't even be traded for much. She notes that back at the academy, the rapid-fire meta debuted a whole century ago, whereas modern pistol builds can effortlessly spray 7 bullets in a single second. Given the green light to do whatever he wants with the loot, he officially sells off the metal. Watching the magical item slowly dissolve and fade away from his avatar's arm, he expectantly opens up his internal stat menu and sees that the transaction hooked him up with 10 points. Unfortunately, it still wasn't enough to trigger a gotcha pull, meaning the exchange rate will require him to farm at least one more one-winged spirit before he can roll for a banger reward. These spirits hold literal god-tier, extraordinary powers, but the system exchange rate is low-key garbage, paying out like minimum wage. Right then, he remembers the glowing notebook still sitting in his hands. It's a legendary sorcerer manual, which basically compiles the user's entire life story like a detailed diary. The second a high-level player dies, their soul automatically respawns back into the arcane realm, permanent projection, and all the core memories of their life grind are condensed into a single book. It can be absorbed smoothly like the metal, granting a completely random banger skill from the original owner. Since he already pocketed the spirit, he tries to hand her the book, but she hard declines, warning him that these texts possess a corrupting nature. No cap, you can only safely read manuals that perfectly align with your character's core worldview. If reading through the chapters doesn't cause any mental discomfort, then it's pretty safe to absorb into your main build. Your average, run-of-the-mill sorcerers are incredibly lucky if they can absorb even 2 out of every 10 manuals they farm, leaving her shocked at how he can just instantly digest them. It's highly possible that his personal worldview is just insanely tolerant, or maybe his actual moral baseline is just flexible as hell. Regardless of the reason, he successfully absorbs the book into his inventory, unlocking a peak passive called Counter Recon Mastery. Suddenly, the entire ground beneath their feet begins to violently shake. The Legacy Island was sinking back into the sea like countless others do, the exact moment they get discovered and looted by active sorcerers. Once a hidden legacy is officially claimed by a player, the island naturally despawns and returns to the bottom of the ocean. Deep in the arcane realm, anything can happen, no cap, as players constantly cross paths with the ghosts of countless predecessors. Eventually, their own data and gameplay traces will remain here too. And centuries later, future generation explorers will pull up to face the exact same challenges that they'll leave behind. She low-key wonders if he's living a life He'd be proud to flex to future generations. The duo's peaceful lore chat gets abruptly cut short, though, as a massive, terrifying sea beast suddenly emerges from the deep. They get tossed around like ragdolls, and their boat completely capsizes. As a monster starts spamming lethal water cannons, straight from its giant, gaping maw, Sonya panics, screaming at him to control the vehicle and steer them far away. But he has absolutely zero clue if he can even drive the thing, while it's completely flipped upside down. Fortunately, his broken admin power still functions flawlessly, and they manage to clutch up and escape from those dangerous waters. They safely cross into a non-aggro safe zone soon enough, desperately looking back to see if the elite mob followed them. The toxic bickering and blame-shifting starts flying instantly. Even though, deadass, they both agreed to vote kick and pull up to this grid sector, since they had already been fruitlessly sailing around in circles for a whole hour before that. She aggressively questions why he didn't just kill that elite mob earlier. But he fires back that if a sweatlord like her couldn't touch it, how on earth could he? His solid logic immediately causes the girl to pause and realize that this guy might actually be way weaker than she originally estimated. However, she quickly forces herself to snap out of it, refusing to let her mind get completely warped by petty thoughts of revenge. No cap, for some bizarre reason, this man can still completely control her avatar. And even a max-level legend like Teo hasn't even noticed his existence. He is undeniably powerful and holds massive clout. And in a server where all regular sorcerers are supposedly balanced equally, he's the only one who can effortlessly see through unknown game-breaking risks. Because of that, this final observer is a god-tier entity sitting far above anyone else. And there's no way she can risk breaking their shared soul bond over a petty grudge. She was incredibly lucky to be chosen by him in the first place, but she worries that if he ever realizes how mid and ordinary she actually is, he might just throw her account straight overboard without a single hesitation. That being said, she still wonders why a literal god would ask such basic, noob-tier questions. Ultimately, Sonya completely misunderstands, assuming he's just acting weak and hiding a terrifying, dangerous power level beneath a casual facade. Proving her exact point, Ash immediately asks for some more basic map information, specifically wanting to know what kind of creature they just barely escaped from. Playing along with his test, she breaks down the lore of that exact species, explaining that it's actually the most common mob type spawning across the arcane realm. Thanks to her detailed explanation, our boy finally gets a much better grasp on how this entire dimension works. Deep within the arcane, deleting a beast rewards you with magic spirits formed from the condensed knowledge they drop. On top of that, the actual loot pools that these knowledge beasts drop will literally update with every new system patch version. For example, if real-world sorcerers manage to theory craft a brand new knowledge system, they can manually manifest an entirely new magic spirit. Meanwhile, players farming inside the arcane can directly birth those exact same spirits, simply by hunting down and clearing these knowledge beasts. If the developers push out a crazy enough update, entirely new monster species can randomly spawn, massively expanding the realm's total biodiversity. To put it plainly, the grinders in the real world and the sweatlords inside the realm both have an equal chance of securing peak results. Comparing this insane system to the corporate grind of his past life, Ash sighs, realizing nobody can ever truly retire comfortably in this meta. Because of how the world's economy is strictly structured, these sorcerers are essentially just lifetime corporate employees who have absolutely zero choice but to keep grinding 24/7. But instead of being discouraged, he gets completely hyped up, fully confident that a corporate survivor like him can effortlessly thrive in this exact situation, considering he already crushed that exact same grind in his previous life. Moving on, Sonya reconfirms that he's completely blind to whatever is lurking inside the fog, and only has a rough estimate of its threat level. Low-key disappointed, she sighs and notes that there's probably zero chance he can track down the legendary golden fish either. When he asks what the heck that is, she assumes that he's just acting clueless and playing dumb for the plot again, by asking such an incredibly basic question. Slapping on her most obvious corporate fake smile, she explains that it's a colossal mythical creature roaming the ocean, which literally carries the entire continent of time on its back, the exact high-tier server that two-winged sorcerers migrate to. Rumor has it that even the smallest single scale on its body is massive enough to hold an entire metropolitan city of 1 million people. Despite its absurd, unmissable size, only a handful of lucky sweatlords have ever successfully managed to run into it. instantly propelling them to peak legendary status. Without a single exception. He casually wonders what makes finding this massive fish such a game changer. And she breaks down the facts, explaining that it automatically updates your account to a 2-winged sorcerer status. No cap, it's an absolute banger of a cheat code. Normally, once a 1-winger hits their max mana cap, they can no longer farm any extra EXP in the basic Sea of Knowledge. To break through their level cap, they are forced to study and manually summon a 2-winged spirit, which serves as the key to unlocking the Gate of Truth, leading straight to the Continent of Time. Once they migrate servers, they can start siphoning high-tier mana again, to finally manifest and unlock their second wing. For reference, the first wing is basic silver, while the second is peak gold. But to legitimately open that Gate of Truth, you absolutely must use a spirit you manually bound yourself, meaning stealing someone else's build is completely off the table. Finding this golden fish is essentially a major progression shortcut, though the more accurate term is straight up being a stowaway, who smoothly smuggles their account from the lower tier lobby straight into the endgame. She fields a spam, asking why he's asking for so much lore, when there's absolutely zero chance he'll ever find it anyway. Suddenly, our boy completely perks up, not because he tracked down the fish or triggered another elite mob aggro, but because his admin screen is officially welcoming them to a glowing golden grid sector on the map. It was a rare adventure island, completely free of any dangerous mobs or stressful trials. In this zone, thousands of wild spirits just frolicked and chilled out happily. Both of them are basically drooling from the absolute abundance of OP choices. And Sonya looks over, asking Ash what on earth he's waiting for. This place was a literal all-you-can-eat buff buffet, and all they had to do was grab them and collect the free loot. With that, they spend the next few hours running around the map like crazy. And while all the wild spirits started scattering around in absolute panic, our duo managed to clutch up and secure a couple of banger drops. The first pull was a rare 1-winged substitute spirit, which possesses the OP ability to create a perfect clone of any target. The second loot drop was a Torrent spirit, built exclusively for shooting high-velocity water jets that deal massive kinetic impact damage to enemies. Ash stared dead at the glowing substitute spirit resting on his palm, fully aware that this was one of the exact components he needed to delete that compliance chip fusing into his neck. Noticing his focus, Sonya casually claims the Torrent spirit for herself, boasting that it'll fetch an absolute bag on her university's auction house. He still has zero clue why an NPC needs to grind for cash, since his brain still flags her as a basic virtual character model. Regardless of the confusion, the two officially wrap up their very first co-op run in the arcane lobby, bidding each other farewell as they prepare to log out. The Sword Maiden glances back at him one last time, reconfirming that the observer is totally blocked from reading her mind, while they're active inside this specific dimension. However, his mind-reading cheat codes will instantly reactivate the second they return to reality. Turns out, she was low-key hiding the full truth from him, because while her Torrent spirit is undeniably rare and valuable, that substitute spirit he pocketed is actually worth a massive fortune. Since it functions as a highly flexible, general-purpose build component, it automatically ranks a whole tier above even the cleanest, most specialized class-specific spirits in the current meta. And no cap, there was a very specific, big-brain reason she hid this fact from him. She might not be able to clearly read his facial expressions, but she easily noticed how desperately he wanted that specific drop. So she intentionally flexed about getting the Torrent spirit, just to make it easier for him to pocket the substitute item, without feeling any toxic gamer guilt. That way, the exact moment they re-enter the real world and he scans her inner thoughts, he'll immediately see right through her wholesome little scheme, even if it doesn't drastically change his macro plans. A thoughtful gesture like this is bound to boost her favorability points in his book by a solid margin. Sonya giggles to herself in pure delight, incredibly proud of the Galaxy Brain strategy she just randomly theory-crafted on the fly. Respawning back in the starry open field of the real world, she immediately pings the observer to initiate a trade chat, but she's met with absolute dead silence on the comms. Literal days fly by, and she continues to log in searching for him, patiently waiting for her master relationship plan to finally pay off. However, the dude completely ghosts her and doesn't queue up at all, causing her to absolutely erupt with toxic rage, as she realizes he deadass took the premium loot and goes to the server, right after she laid out the perfect, sugar-coated honey trap, too. And so, while Sonya is busy crashing out and cursing the observer for leaving her completely hanging. She gets violently jump-scared as someone casually walks up and greets her with a good morning. Turns out it was Cecilia, pointing out that she seems way too hyped and excited. After logging into the arcane server for the very first time, Sonya forcefully returns the morning greeting to the high-tier senior, whom she only naturally ran into because of Felix's constant drama. The two are actually pretty similar players, in the sense that they are both toxic huntresses, down bad to do absolutely anything just to rank up and climb higher. Right after the girl laid out the perfect honeypot trap to snare her boyfriend, this talented school junior swooped into the lobby to steal his full attention. So it's honestly no wonder she's radiating pure hostile energy towards her. But to her absolute surprise, Cecilia suddenly backs away after getting within melee range. Watching the senior physically cover her nose in mock disgust, Sonya literally burns with pure rage, because she deadass knows her character model doesn't smell bad at all. Annoyed by the toxic behavior, she throws a petty jab right back. But her comebacks are still way too mid and insignificant to deal real damage. The senior then starts flexing a rare, inherited spirit she just farmed, which literally looks like a small toddler clinging for dear life to his sword sheath. It was a peak drop that massively boosts the user's base strength stats. And when min-maxed and paired up with the absolute correct spirit setup, a player can even branch their subclass into a broken assassin swordsman, equipped with lethal execution abilities. They're completely unattainable to any other faction builds. Yet despite its insane auction house value, she is still, surprisingly, no cap, completely dead set on gifting this OP drop to her boyfriend. Staring directly at her incredibly smug, punchable expression, Sonya's eyes widen as she realizes that she must have looked like the exact same clown last night. Cecilia then maliciously brings up her low-income, poor family background, muttering that she'll finally be able to carry them once she levels up. Making the trash talk deeply personal, she even suggests that her broke family is actively nerfing her true potential. The Sword Maiden's eyes turn pitch black with sheer homicidal intent for a brief second, but she somehow fakes a calm smile and lets the insult slide, silently tanking the backhanded comments like a champ. The arrogant elite woman is low-key stunned, never expecting the girl to just stand there smiling and digest such toxic, offensive remarks without crashing out on the spot. However, Sonya actually has a galaxy brain counterattack planned to completely fold this gloating casual, telling her that her face is looking a little dirty. She calmly extends her open palm forward and shoots a gentle, controlled stream of crystal-clear water straight at her. Cecilia watches in absolute mud shock as she washes her face and flexes the glowing torrent spirit she easily pocketed during her arcane realm grind session. Just last night, the smug newbie laughs the flex off, claiming she just luckily stumbled into a rare banger adventure island room. But the senior wasn't buying any of her story. She was definitely not dumb enough to fall for the cap that some low-level rookie on her first run would just randomly stumble into a mythical island room, let alone pocket the absolute most precious spirit of the entire water meta. It was also mathematically impossible for her to have swiped it off the auction house, considering torrents are literally priceless and almost never get listed on the open market. To her, there was only one high-tier whale who could have handed her such an OP drop, getting called over. The senior plasters on a fake smile and links up with her junior. They start walking toward the academy gates together, flexing and chatting about their respective spirit builds like total besties. That being said, Sonya knows deep down Cecilia is absolutely fuming, convinced that Felix must have gifted her the torrent out of his own stash. Meanwhile, Ash finally wakes up at 8 in the morning, instantly expecting to load up on a massive breakfast spread. But to his absolute disappointment, the entire cafeteria lobby was already completely packed with try-hard prisoners, who had logged on and started queuing even earlier than him. Sighing as he's reminded of all the massive troubles waiting for him, he tries to boot up and test the new spirit he just obtained. It's a completely foolish misplay, as the neck chip immediately zaps his system and flashes a red text warning him that using magic scripts is strictly prohibited. With this massive L, he finally realizes the catch. 22. The system chip is actively nerfing him from casting the exact type of high-tier magic he needs in order to bypass and delete the chip itself. It was a total bricked loop, a game-ending paradox, and there was absolutely nothing he could do to cheese it. He just stands in the long line with a completely depressed look on his face, low-key wondering where the Sword Maiden was hiding out. Finally reaching the front of the queue, his eyes light up as he sees massive plates of premium seafood sitting right there. However, his ordering phase gets rudely interrupted, as a sweatlord prisoner cuts the line and hogs 5 massive portions, completely for himself. The lunch lady just dumps all the premium food contents straight into one giant bowl, and Ash instantly starts complaining about how the Beastmen are getting way more food resources than human players. Turns out, the meta has always been unbalanced like that, and absolutely nobody ever dares to question the server rules besides him. He keeps on whining about how there's going to be 0 loot left for his own plate, but his mouth is suddenly slammed shut tight by the system, instantly silencing him mid-sentence. A UI notification pops up stating he was about to drop a racially toxic statement, which is strictly prohibited under the prison's terms of service. Stomping over to an empty table, he desperately wants to crash out and scream, but his words are completely muted and stuck right in his throat, and his fingers completely lock up and begin to shake. He's visibly fuming with toxic rage, but can't even drop a single line of trash talk. He desperately tries to override the system, but his own character model refuses to respond. Compared to this supposedly civilized, aggressively micromanaged prison, the literal blood-soaked chaos of the deathmatch club actually felt way more chill. Hurrying back over to the fighting arena, he spots Lang down below, even noting that his bro's character model looked noticeably smaller today. He grabs an empty spot on the spectator bleachers, finding the vibe over here infinitely more relaxing. Right on cue, a highly familiar voice rings out right next to him. Igor materializes out of nowhere, quickly giving him his word that he's not trying to queue up for a deathmatch lobby against him, mostly because he's not entirely sure he'd actually secure the win. At this stage of the game, Ash knew way better than to blindly trust this dude's sly, metagaming brain. Seeing his guard up, the cunning player offers to engage in the most ancient form of human connection. Right at that exact second, a pair of mating flies buzzes past their faces with the absolute worst comedic timing possible. Visibly irritated by the distraction, Igor snaps that he's dead ass just talking about doing a basic information trade. He wagers that Ash is dying to know exactly why that high-tier elf, Varkas, randomly decided to challenge him to a duel out of the blue. While that lore drop is undeniably juicy, Ash is highly skeptical that this succubus build is just going to feed him straight cap. When told to flip a coin on whether he's getting real facts or a bluff, Ash completely hard declines, knowing he'll just end up getting mind-gamed. Getting slightly annoyed that his target isn't biting, Igor just decides to dump the raw intel on him for free, and let him calculate its total value on his own. If the leak turns out to be a certified banger, then Ash is expected to answer one of his questions on the flip side. Turns out, Varkas used to be a high-ranking research scholar over at Cayman, but uniquely because of his prestigious elven race modifier, he has never once been forced to queue into the server's judgment ritual, despite being locked down in this facility for 5 whole years. Now, total racial equality is marketed as one of the absolute bedrock server rules of this prison system. No cap, it's officially listed as the #1 priority, but in reality, certain premium races are just way more equal than others. To truly comprehend why he went out of his way to aggro the cult leader, they first have to break down the specific crime that got him banned. The thing that completely triggered the high-level admins who had him arrested was the fact that he was secretly raising a human child in private. Still completely unaccustomed to how this world society works, Ash is totally bewildered as to why that's even flagged as a violation. After all, how else are kids supposed to grow up if they aren't being personally raised by their own parents? Staring back in absolute disbelief, Igor checks him, reminding him that a state-run, socialized upbringing in foster facilities is the literal foundation of their entire nation. Realizing that every single citizen was raised by the government, the ice-eyed outsider tries to voice his thoughts, but instantly freezes up. He wants to say they're all just parentless orphans, but the words completely fail to materialize. And no cap, it wasn't even the server's anti-toxic chip blocking him. It was because the literal vocabulary for father, mother, and parents straight up didn't exist in this world's entire language database. What kind of dystopian world did he actually get re-rolled into, where child rearing is completely socialized and government chips manually control your speech? Processing this massive lore bomb, he switches gears for now, asking what all this has to do with Varkas and his hidden kid. See, the elf almost never initiates fights himself, yet he lives comfortably like a king. Just by farming the points of the overconfident challengers, he completely folds. But this time, he went out of his way to throw down the gauntlet, and the only viable explanation is to secure a better future for that kid. There's only one key VIP entity linking all these dots together. And his name is silent. Ash has definitely heard that name tossed around a few times in the lobby, but he still has absolutely zero clue who the guy is, or why Igor was suddenly poking his cheek like a weirdo. The major player they're talking about is a legendary history professor at the university, who also doubles as the president of an elite elven association. He's highly suspected of hunting down members of the Ancient Relic Research Society, an organization where the cult leader currently rules as the top president. There's clearly a massive, high-stakes conspiracy connecting the dots behind the scenes. Ash's big brain gears start turning, realizing that this professor must be the high-level backing behind his own leadership of the Four Pillars faction. With all that free data successfully leaked, it was finally time for Igor to cash in on his question. He demands to know exactly how the young man managed to hardbait him, using his own inner monologue inside the arena. Turns out, Igor's build allows him to eavesdrop on his enemy's inner thoughts, which is basically a cheat code that lets him always secure the dub. To break down his OP passive even more precisely, he can literally intercept the whispers of their souls by reading their surging, raw emotions. This is the absolute first time Ash is hearing about this broken mechanic, and he straight up calls him a dirty cheater for abusing such a toxic tactic. Regardless of the salt, this is exactly what leaves Igor completely mind-boggled. How on earth did Ash still manage to land a heavy punch right to his jaw? Our boy just give him a blank stare, stating that wanting to fold someone and genuinely thinking they look like a nice person aren't mutually exclusive. However, if his soul truly harbored the intent to deck him, he deadass should have intercepted those exact hostile thoughts as well. Ash just continues to act completely nonchalant about the whole thing, casually claiming his mind must have briefly drifted off to another server. Right in the middle of his explanation, he flashes a smug smile, admitting that, no cap, the dude genuinely looks spectacular in his eyes. The heavy punch that followed that exact thought happened solely because he suddenly snapped back to reality. After completely spacing out, it was a totally ridiculous, low-tier explanation, as a prominent figure like the cult leader would never be that silly. As the succubus starts completely losing his patience with the banter, and even gets told that his OP telepathic powers must be highly limited, he reaches out and touches the young man's face. See, he can accurately scan if a player is lying to him, just by measuring the minute temperature shifts across their face model. So regardless of whatever trash talk comes out of his mouth, Igor should technically be able to tell if he's capping or telling the truth. With that framework set, Ash boldly declares that he is lying right this second. That specific statement causes the human lie detector's brain to completely short-circuit, malfunctioning hard as it faces a bricked, endless paradox loop, regularly encountered during standard corporate job interviews. Right at that moment, he overhears nearby players gossiping about the high-tier elf lord. A couple of orcs aggressively pull up into Varkas's personal space, sarcastically offering to sign up as his personal servants, despite their own low-tier race modifiers. Right then, the elf politely bows, thanking them for their sudden concern for his well-being. However, he is definitely not the type of player to just take toxic bait lying down, and immediately mirrors the exact same sarcasm right back into their faces. This verbal counterattack triggers a massive, angry reaction from the orc squad, but they're physically unable to spray any explicit insults back at him, because the compliance chips instantly seal their mouths completely shut. The very millisecond the system detects hostile vocabulary, being galaxy-brain enough to effortlessly work around the server's automated moderation, and uniquely abuse super docile-sounding insults. Varkas systemically triggers absolutely everyone one by one, causing the entire group's mouths to get forced shut by the global admin filter. Ash just stands there spectating, incredibly impressed, watching the elf completely out-macro all the brain-dead prisoners in the room, and totally dominate the lobby war with his poisonous tongue mechanics. One particularly dumb orc lets his rage completely override his brain, and deadass tries to manually kick him down in a non-combat zone. As expected, the anti-grief chip instantly folds him, forcing his character to collapse. With all the toxic background noise successfully cleared out of the lobby, Varkas looks straight up at Ash, asking to finally launch their scheduled 1v1 match, assuming there aren't any further delays on his end. A short time later, the two combatants stand dead center in the fighting arena as planned, and are equipped with basic swords to initiate the duel. The young man casts a quick glance up toward the spectator bleachers, desperately scanning the crowd for the sword maiden, but his party list was completely empty, leaving him solo just like he had been for a while. low-key intrigued and surprisingly worried about the matchup. Igor warns him that Varkas is built completely different and scales way higher than him, meaning he can't just be cheesed with cheap arena tricks. The lobby tips and backseat advice keep raining down from the bleachers, but the elf instantly cuts through their loud commentary, straight up calling the spectators a bunch of worthless maggots and annoying flies that won't stop buzzing senselessly. He notes that even if these casuals somehow manage to evolve into butterflies, they're still completely worthless inside this absolute cesspit of a prison server. Silently, he offers a brief apology to Ash before starting the raid. Our boy is completely shook, no cap, as a blinding blade strike slices clean through his shoulder out of nowhere. The attack speed was peak, and he was heavily struggling to even track the animation. But he knows he has to close the gap immediately if he wants to survive this round. He swings his blade with everything he's got, thinking he spotted a brief opening in the elf's defensive frames that he could exploit. However, Varkas skillfully spins his sword downward to execute a perfect parry. Barely even breaking a sweat, he calmly asks the kid if he's ever actually leveled up his swordsmanship stats at all, before landing a heavy elbow strike dead center on his face. As Ash is actively collapsing toward the floor, he catches sight of a lethal follow-up thrust coming straight for his head. He barely manages to panic roll away in the nick of time, leaving the steel blade to drive deep into the solid arena floor. Mind you, their practice weapons aren't even sharp, yet the dude somehow completely shattered the stone floor like it was nothing. Turns out, Varkas was actively channeling an OP spirit, which he casually points out is standard procedure for any real sorcerer in a 1v1. Certain high-tier abilities simply cannot be locked away by server rules, even if your hands and feet are completely bound against your will. He believes that if your limbs are heavily nerfed, you simply have to grow a pair of wings and fly above the limitations. His follow-up slash unleashes a massive kinetic shockwave that tears a giant rift completely across the arena floor. It was a peak elven sword miracle, the legendary mountain-splitting earth slicer. The entire audience is completely mud and in total disbelief that he was actually bypassing system restrictions to manifest magic and spirits. However, activating basic spell, spirits, and executing high-tier miracles are two completely different metas, since a miracle requires a complex chain combo of multiple spirits working together. Even a sweatlord like Igor has never once successfully pulled off a miracle combo. Inside this prison map, with that insane display, he's absolutely certain that Ash is totally cooked, and won't even leave a body behind after this match finishes downloading. But just as the crowd starts thinking it's a pity his run ended so fast, the shocked onlookers suddenly notice that the young man is somehow still holding on to his HP bar, even if the miracle's base attack damage had been heavily nerfed to a mere fraction. There is simply no mathematical way for a casual like him to survive that hit, as a broken attack like that should easily delete the entire HP bar of someone who can barely even keep his training sword steady. But suddenly, the look in Ash's eyes completely shifts to a whole new level, and he realizes he can actually read the exact trajectory data of the blade. His locked-in gaze instantly gives Igor and Lang absolute chills down their spines, suddenly reminding them of the terrifying, god-tier power behind the Four Pillars cult.